Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, September 25th, 2019, and we are at the Moore Street School in the cafeteria. And it sounds like perhaps Freeport High School just scored in the field hockey game outside based on the cheering, so let's hope that's true.
They're excited for our school board meeting.
That's right. Or they're cheering for us. That's a good point, Lindsay. We have everyone here except for Candy is not here this evening, and we wanted to welcome back Rhea, who was reelected as the student rep. And she will be sharing it this year with Liam Hornchild Bear. Is that right? So we'll get to know him throughout the year. But thank you for agreeing to do this again. We appreciate it and your perspective. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. There it is on the wall. So I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the September 11th, 2019 board meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions. Lindsay, Maddie, thank you. All those in favor? None opposed? Thank you. Adjustments to the agenda? None?
Well, I think, Rhea, do you have a report tonight? Okay.
Oh, I thought we were going to do that under good news. Sorry.
Well, yeah, so that's the addition, 6C.
Okay, 6C. All right, we're going to add Rhea back in.
Okay.
All right, so we'll move right on to good news and recognition, and we will start with John Meringue.
Okay, so John is here with us, a former board member, I think as of June 30th. And so we have a small gift to present to him. It's a token of our appreciation for your 15 years of service to the students of Freeport, Durham, and Pownell. And this gift that I'm going to give you is made from a burl on a tree. Burl is a tree growth in which the grain has grown in a deformed manner. It's commonly found in the form of a rounded outgrowth on a tree trunk, resulting from the tree undergoing some form of stress. But from this stress, burls yield a very peculiar and highly sought-after wood, prized for its beauty and rarity. And John, I feel like you have advocated for all of our students, the ones who have easily grown and thrived, and for those who have a few burls and have experienced stress and struggled in their short lifetimes. You have advocated equally for all of our students, no matter what pathway they have chosen, believing that all students, no matter their shortcomings, their stresses, their strengths, that one by one, each will be transformed into noble adults and should be prized and cherished. We want to thank you for your 15 years of service, for your support of the staff, your support of Region 10, your service on the Finance Committee, for your 15 tireless years of advocacy for public education, and most of all, for your advocacy for all of our students. You will be sorely missed, but thank you.
Beautiful. Oh, that is beautiful. Thank you very much. Making my speech very difficult. Okay, most of you know me, in spite of the seriousness of her comments. I'm a man of very few words. I think action speaks, but I took a few notes so that I could keep the meeting going tonight. But no, on a more serious note, it has indeed been my pleasure and a good fortune over the past 15-plus years to have served with so many dedicated and intelligent people whose primary focus has been in the education of all of our children in the RSU. And I thank you for your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck with the geometry. He told us he had to head out right away because he's got geometry homework this evening. All right, so moving on to good news from Moore Street School, Julie Nickerson.
So I have 2 spots tonight, so I'm going to just briefly talk about our start to the year. And if you can't understand me, I overheard 2 kindergartners this morning talking to each other, telling each other that, do you know Mrs. Nickerson speaks Chinese? So, so if you can't understand me, that will be why. So we're off to a great start. We have welcomed 309 students at Moore Street this fall, which when I first came here, we had 220, so it speaks to our growing population. In part, it's our expansion of pre-K, which we're excited that we were able to do that with your support, and we filled all those spots. So we have 64 in our pre-K this year. And staying with our pre-K, we were excited this summer to host our first pre-K institute for our pre-K teachers who we feel like as we've expanding our program, we need to really support them with PD. So we did a 3-day institute. Susan D. and myself presented that, and it really focused on early literacy, foundational pieces, and the importance of play and embedding early literacy and storytelling and language skills within play and how we can support it. So we had all of our pre-K teachers from the district and a couple from outside of the district that came and joined us for that. And we were fortunate enough to host that during summer programming, which meant we could do lab sites too, which we know we really value when our TC staff developers come, but because it was summer, we were kind of problem solving around how we could replicate that experience. So that was a great start has set our pre-K teachers up for a great year to really think about how we're improving our programming for our pre-Kers. I have lots more things to tell you, but much of that is embedded in the goals, so I'll come back to that later.
Thank you. And now our student representative report.
Hello again, I'm Raya Fitzpatrick, and I'm so glad to be back representing the student body again this year with my new co-rep Liam HB, who you'll meet next week. The school year is getting off to a great start, and let me tell you that senioritis is a real thing, it's not a myth. As for sports, the Falcons have been soaring, so far this year, with the most recent wins being boys varsity soccer beat Cape Elizabeth last night, girls varsity field hockey beat Wells on Monday, as well as Yarmouth on Saturday, boys varsity football beat Lake Region last Friday, and girls varsity soccer beat York last Friday, so all very impressive. Okay, in upcoming news, there will be a flu clinic on Tuesday in the high school cafeteria, Tuesday, October 1st, from 3 to 7. All 10th and 11th grade students will be taking the PSAT on Wednesday, on Wednesday, October 16th. So if you're a student or parent and haven't heard about that, maybe check up on that. There will be an optional field trip to Southern Maine Community College for 11th and 12th graders on Wednesday, October 23rd. And that's all for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, public comment. We do have some folks here this evening, so I'll just give you a quick reminder of how public comment works. If you wanted to share something with the board, we welcome that. We just request that you come up to the podium, tell us your name, where you're from, keep your comments to 3 minutes, and if there's any follow-up that needs to be done, Cynthia, who's in the second row, will take down any contact information so we can get back to you if we need any follow-up. I know that was probably longer than anyone's public comments, but those are the rules, so just thought I would share. Okay. So we will move on to the report from the superintendent.
Okay, so I agree with Raya that the beginning of the year has gone well. In your packet is the enrollment data from the beginning of school. and it shows us continuing to trend up, but I want you to remind you that we did add an additional pre-K at Moore Street. If you subtract out those 16 students, our enrollment is pretty much the same as last year. There are 2 grade levels at Durham Community School that I want to draw your attention to. Grades 2 and 3 have hit the threshold level. Will and I have discussed these classes and feel they're fine for the moment, but we will continue to monitor them closely. And Rhea just gave you a sports update, and I will add that our golf team finished 3rd in the WMC qualifier, and next up is the state championship on October the 5th. And currently in football, we're at 2 wins and 0 losses. Girls soccer is at 5 wins with 1 loss. Field hockey is 5-2 and 1 tie, and currently that what we just scored, so we're at 1-0, I hear. Boys soccer is currently 3 wins, 2 losses, 1 tie. The cross-country conference competition is October the 18th, and I did want to mention that homecoming is October the 18th and 19th, and so all of our teams are on track at the moment to qualify for the postseason, so go Falcons. And a big thank you to Rhea and Liam, who will be our student reps, and we just really value your time and your voice, and we look forward always to your updates. Also in your packet is a list of our new hires and resignations that happened over the summer or at the beginning of this school year. Our Director of Finance, Michelle Lichtai, is amongst those that will be leaving us, and she's decided to move back to Michigan near her family, so we wish her luck in that move. Lots of learning is going on in RSU 5. The high school on Friday hosted approximately 50 staff from other high schools to learn from our staff about proficiency-based education, thanks to Maddie and Valley, who were able to attend to see and learn along with area staff members from other schools. This Saturday, we'll be hosting what is called Nerd Camp at Freeport High School, where teachers from all over New England will come here to learn more about literacy. In this type of learning structure, participants of the workshop decide which topics will be explored that morning, and then they really go to the group that they have the most interest in, and the event really is on literacy and is focused pre-K through 12, so that's great that we're hosting that again for, I think this is either our 2nd or 3rd year that we've done that. And then one of the board's next opportunities for learning is the conference coming up on October 24th and 25th. That's put on by MSMA and MSBA, and there's always a lot of good workshops, and I really encourage you to attend if you can, and please let Jenny know if you're interested, and she'll get you registered. And then I'll just finish my report on a note following up with that Julie speaks Chinese. I was speaking with Principal Pidden earlier in the week, and he said one of the students, he overheard them say, you know, Mr. Pidden could be an English actor. And that concludes my board report for the night.
So do you not speak Chinese?
No, I
Oh.
I just spoken to them about doing the hamster themselves and stuff, and it was after that.
Verda? Maddie?
I just wanted to comment that I was grateful for the opportunity to attend the workshop at the high school on Friday, and was very impressed with the presentation that Jen and Charlie and some members of the staff gave. It was really an honest assessment of our transition and into proficiency-based learning, and that was great. But I wanted to share 2 quotes because we got to visit classrooms, and it was really great to hear teachers from other districts reflect on our students. So first one is that students are well-versed in conversation with adults, which I think is something I always am impressed with. And another one was, there's an emotional maturity at this school, it's a pervasive climate, the emotional maturity. I thought that was something you might enjoy knowing about our FHSers.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, you were just pointing out Maddie's hand up? Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, so we will move on to item 9, which is the administrator reports. Finance is up first with Michelle.
Good evening. You'll see in your purple file there that we have about 90.31% remaining for the year. And I just wanted to point out, compared to last year, we were at 90.25%. So we're right on target for where I expect us to be. So no unexpected things coming up at this point. And that concludes my report. Any questions?
It's always easy at the beginning of the budget year.
Really easy at the beginning of the budget year.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Next up is Erin Dow with the student nutrition report.
Mine's not going to be that quick. So it's a new year, and we have some new faces. We have Amy Hawkridge, who joined us last year at Freeport High School, is now the 3rd member of our staff at the middle school. Last year I put in for a 30-hour-a-week position to help expand some of our offerings, streamline some of our service, and most importantly, get kids through the line more quickly so that they had more time to eat. And that's definitely working. And then in her place, we hired Ashley Robinson, who has kids here in the district. She joined us at the high school for 30 hours a week. Freeport Middle School's meals were up 10% last year from the previous year, and so it was really important to get another body in there. And it's been great. And so far, revenues this month are up 50% there than the same time period last year. I usually give my report a little later in the year, so my stats aren't as comprehensive. And I want to give a shout out to the Freeport Sustainability Committee, who gave us a grant. It was awarded last year, in July, for us to make some moves on getting reusable silverware in some of the Freeport schools that are heavily relying upon plastic right now, so we're in the process of doing that. As far as equipment goes, I've had a bit of a struggle with the start of this year. We had a horrible start of the year last year, and I thought that with the maintenance that I had done and preventive maintenance and also some of the repairs that we did in inspections, that we might have an easier time getting this year started, but I was wrong. The equipment's definitely starting to show its age, but fortunately we've got some good vendors that are very responsive, and so we haven't really had any interruptions to student meals, although they have seen some new faces quite a few times in the kitchens lately. So far I've repaired 3 dishwashers, 3 coolers, a walk-in cooler, and 2 exhaust fans. And I did put more money in the budget for repairs last year, and it seems like that was a good move. But it kind of brings up one of my goals in the strategic plan, which is a longer-term goal to do a comprehensive assessment of all of our equipment and take an inventory of that and really have it gone over and looked at and figure out what the best steps are for us in terms of capital improvements. Because I think that plan was kind of formulated a while ago and doesn't really contemplate some of the goals that we've set for the program moving forward. So I think I'm going to get started on that a little earlier than 2021 or whenever that goal was. So as always, our number one goal is still to feed kids quality meals, and then our second goal is to feed more of them. And so last year, our meal counts were up 6% at breakfast and 7% at lunch, and so that's another jump from the year previous. So we're excited about that. It feels like it's sustainable growth, and I think it's allowed all of us to kind of adapt to what we're trying to do here. So I want to just review some of our next moves in terms of the menu and you know, the day-to-day operations as far as what the kids and adult customers see. This year the state is matching a small portion of local food purchases, and so Valley was kind enough to share with me a local vendor list that she got from an associate from hers, and I'm also attending the Maine Farm to School conference next month, just to kind of get a sense of the best practices for that, because it is a little bit more complicated sometimes than just buying it from a box off the truck like we usually do. The high school and the middle school are prioritizing their fresh salad bars as a more viable meal option, so not just like the vegetable, but an actual meal instead of what they might get on the hotline. So we're targeting that right now with the older students because they're better able to make the better decisions. So we're throwing stuff in there like tuna and chicken salad, eggs and cheese, and Bertha's even making some kind of teriyaki tofu over at the middle school that they seem to like. I'm pretty sure that wouldn't be your favorite, Becky. But a nice benefit of that as well is to cut the wait times down in line, which again is a really big deal. It's exceedingly difficult to give kids enough time to eat when we're trying to work around a bell schedule, because after all, education is most important. And so anything we can do to just kind of, even if we can shave 2 minutes, 90 seconds off their time in line, that's another 6 bites they can take, or 60 or 90 seconds to make a better decision than whatever's right in front of them. So that's definitely part of our overall approach to, keeping these kids making good decisions. Over the summer, I had 3 of my staff members attend the School Nutrition Association National Conference, and so 2 of them are here, but they're always here with me, so thank you. But I just want to tell the board and the district in general how much I appreciate the opportunity to send people away for a while, somewhere new and exciting. There are thousands of people that go to that conference, and all 3 of them, Deanna and Dorothy and Stephanie from Pownell, came back with big wide eyes and new product lists and samples and new ideas for menus or products. And so, for example, next Thursday, I think, I'm going to go over, we ordered some stuff that Deanna saw at the show, and we're going to try it out. We're going to test something and try to put something from what she took from national conference and state conference back and put it on the menu next month. So thank you for that. I hope we can do more of it. We're also at the high school using that program as a test to develop and scale some recipes for batch cooking, which is either prepping food ahead and freezing it, or prepping it somewhere and satelliting it to another location. And the reason for that is it's a really solid way to reduce food waste in your program. It's amazing how little food waste we have. I mean, any of you could carry out the garbage from any one of our kitchens, the biggest kitchens, in one bag. But there's still, that top of that bell pepper or that few slices of onion. And so Lori has been looking at some recipes, mostly vegetarian options, so that we can increase our offerings there, but also ones that can be adapted to include meat, so that every time we offer it, we have an option for a non-meat and a meat option. And then lastly, and I think most exciting, we're going to expand on our success last year at Mass Landing. I can't remember if I talked about this, but we did a menu development thing at Mass Landing with all 3 grades. We gave them a suggestion box. We took those suggestions and we created 2 menus that each of the 3 grades could vote for, and then we featured them on the menu. And we had a big raucous rally, and I'm not sure if Emily might have regretted inviting me over to talk to all of her kids at once, but it ended up being a huge success, and the numbers showed it. And I get tired of coming up with things sometimes. Maybe not tired, but I get writer's block too. And who better than kids to kind of give us an idea of what they want to eat? It's our job to make it healthy, balanced, meet the meal pattern. So we're going to do some more of that this year. So at Durham, we have a plan for October for the 3rd and 4th graders to put together the same types of menus. We're going to give them a suggestion box. I'm sure We'll have some interesting ones like we did last time. And then in November, we're going to serve that meal to the whole school. And this may be a spoiler alert, but you all are going to be invited to come up. And at Pownell, we're also doing the same thing. It's already happening with the 5th grade, and 4th grade is next on the list. So I got to get my water because I didn't anticipate how dry my mouth would be. We had to come up with some department goals, so you've received that graph. And so I just want to talk a little bit about each of those goals, what I've been working on, and what I will be continuing to work on. For the department goal 1 and 2, the free and reduced outreach, but the biggest question I've been having lately, and I've probably said it here before, is are we reaching everyone we need to reach in terms of who needs help to pay for their kids' meals? It's no secret that RSU 5 has a very high negative meal balance. In fact, we made the press for it. And that was really a trigger for me to not look at, like, why aren't they paying their bills, but what's behind this. And so the first thing I did was look at what's coming down the pike. I knew that our direct certification list for this school year was going to be lower. Direct certification list is a list of all the students in our district that receive SNAP or TANF benefits, are foster children, or are homeless, according to the state. We don't really know why they're down. There's speculation that it's a higher minimum wage, or Department of Education doesn't even really know why it's down right now. I knew that the state was going to cover the 40-cent reduced price lunch price this year. Usually when you qualify for free meals, breakfast and lunch are free. And if you qualify for reduced meals at a higher income level, breakfast is free and lunch is 40 cents. And the state said, you know what, we're going to pay that this year because we want to see if that'll get more people to apply. And so that's what I decided to pile on. And so I started doing some really aggressive free and reduced application outreach. I sent out emails early. I had a giveaway, a raffle, for the first 100 applications that came in, and it worked because last year on the first day of school, we had 137 kids that were newly qualified for free and reduced, and on the start of school this year, we had 252. So right there, I was like, okay, great. But as of today, compared to September 25th of last year, we have 319 kids qualified versus 252 the previous year. So right away, we have fewer unpaid meal days, so that's going to obviously help our negative balances, and less stress for the families, which is important. But the most notable thing, based on the stats that I've run so far, is that the number of people who qualified for reduced price meals, so they're getting it free because the state's covering it this year, but they weren't reduced last year, is up 104%. So that tells me, yeah, there was a pocket of people in this town that didn't apply even though they qualified, and we got some of them. So that, again, more fewer unpaid meal days. So moving forward, I'm working on ways to cross-check all of these people who qualify within our student population. We have a lot of families here that have 2 to 3 last names amongst the parent and the students that are in our district. So I'm working with the technology specialist to nail that down. And we've got to follow up on the people whose temporary eligibility is going to expire in the middle of October, but that's going well. And so one of the questions I had from the board is kind of a segue into the next section, which is the new food shaming legislation. And the food shaming legislation that came down from the state went into effect on September 19 was that you can't talk to kids about their negative balance. And we never made that a practice here, for the most part. Sure, we'd say to a high schooler or a middle schooler, look, you might want to remind mom that, you need to bring some money in. but that's done. We can't talk to them about it. And so that kind of hamstrings us a little bit further in how we can address these negative balances. So I approached the Finance Committee about some ideas that I had, and then implemented some new things around making sure that parents know what meals cost, how you pay, when you pay, to try to mitigate this even further, because this is one of the things I just identified as a major obstacle to this nutrition program, was just the lack of payment from families that technically should or hadn't qualified to not. So I did invitations to apply early. The Finance Committee expressed a desire to want to forgive the meal debt for households that completed the application, which is a policy that we have here at RSU 5, and so we did that. And then in July, the high school sent out letters to students that had negative balances and said, you have a negative balance and you need to pay that up before you get your laptop. And so for weeks, Lori P. and I at the high school collaborated. We were updating lists. I followed up with an invitation to apply for free and reduced meals, because I can help you with your balance and we can just get the laptop. And the net result of that was somewhere in the neighborhood of $8,000 of meal debt paid off. It could be more, because that's just what I processed in my own office with checks that Lori sent me from parents who sent them in. And we had students who ended up filling out that application. Finally, we knew that they qualified, but we could never get that application in. Some of them had meal debts of upwards of $1,000. And so now, again, their debt is handled, so that pressure is off the family. They do qualify for free and reduced meals. That revenue is now coming to us in the form of a subsidy, and we're not having to deal with an unpaid bill. And so, so the net effect of that is at the end of July of this year, which is when I closed out my books, RSU 5's negative balance was around $34,000, and today it's under $14,000. So I hope that this is a sign that we might be turning this issue around, because it's definitely been dogging the program. Another one of my goals is to improve parent communication along the same lines with, here's your bill, here's how you pay, here are the menus. I've been sending some stuff out by school messenger to make sure I can reach as many people as I can. We're sending people negative balance reminders every week. And so all of that combined has helped increase the amount of money coming into the program. People are prepaying their accounts now instead of just paying their negative balances. And so for the first time in my time here, the nutrition program has a positive cash balance in terms of negative debts versus account credits. At the end of July, it was negative 13,000, and today it was positive 23,000. So I'm glad that that's turning around a little bit. Finally, in terms of sustainability, in 2019, we eliminated straws at Freeport Middle School, Durham Community School, Moore Street School. We've got mixed recycling at Durham Community School, Moore Street, Mass Landing in the high school, composting at the high school and Mass Landing. We switched to low-waste juice box formats where we could. We've switched to bulk condiment dispensers at the high school in Durham, and we switched to individually wrapped products, from individually wrapped products to bulk products to reduce that packaging. So this year, our goals are, and some of them we've already done. You may have noticed the cute reusable drink straws that we have at Freeport High School that are a huge hit, and they are reusing them. We got these awesome, like Panera-style salad bowls. Instead of giving them a paper or bowl, where we've got these 32-ounce bowls so people can make their big salads for lunch. We did the same thing with soup bowls. We're going to online-only menus for the elementary school starting October 1st, and parents have been made aware of that. And then we're looking at getting in some reusable coffee and iced tea cups for the high school, switch to bulk condiment dispensers at additional schools, and then get the silverware that we've been given the grant for. And that's what I have.
That's quite a bit.
I know, sorry.
No, that's
I cut it
fantastic.
down too. I was like, what's going on?
You might win the award for like the most things done by September 25th. That's a lot. Do we have any other questions for Erin while we have her? Yes, Jen.
Can you explain again? First of all, that was fantastic. A lot of good information. When you were talking about the forgiven debt, was that when they filled out an application?
Yep.
Do you have the numbers of like what that ended up?
I don't, because I haven't done all of the credits yet. I've been doing these things, but also the priority has been to get the applications processed, and
Right.
my goal has been to get them processed and the letter of notification out the door the same day.
So where does that come off your money though, when for the nutrition budget? Like when you forgive it, does that automatically just go as a?
No, technically the debt forgiveness has to be incurred through the school's general fund. It can't
Okay.
come from nutrition, because our funds are technically federal funds, so it's not
Okay,
an
well,
allowable cost.
That's a good
Yeah.
good thing. So.
Thank you.
You're
That
welcome.
was excellent.
Thanks.
So thank you for that report and all the great work that you put into generating the report
Thanks.
and getting to the point where the generation happened. I had a question that I get from parents about the My School Bags program. Some people would prefer to be able to load upfront more money so that they don't have to constantly reload, especially for families that have multiple children. Each child needs to have his or her own
Sure.
account. Is that possible?
I can look into that and get you an answer. But that's a really good question, and one I hadn't even really considered before. So I
Okay.
will look into that.
Thank you.
Like they want to put the whole year's worth up front.
Yeah,
Right, because I think what happens is that people load it up and then it runs out and they have multiple children and it takes them a while to get back on the computer and reload all the accounts, and by then they may have negative debt without realizing. And it's just an extra thing for families to do.
Sure.
They have to do it frequently.
And there's also, each time you put money on, there's the service fee.
Yeah, the
Right,
fee.
so if you put it
Yeah.
on less often, but in a larger amount, then
Yeah.
you limit that cost too.
Does the district pay a fee to use that system, or the only fees that the system gets are the ones that the parents get charged?
We pay a fee to.
You pay one
we
too.
we pay a. I guess it would be an additional cost. That it's integrated with our point of sale service, so we pay an additional. I think it's $995 a year. But what that does is it allows it to completely seamlessly integrate not only with our POS system, but also our free and reduced app system. So the three of them together are a package.
Okay.
Maura.
Thank you so much. I wanted to echo the other board members. I think that change in the balance is incredible.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I was astounded when you said that number. So, and I also wanted to say, I think the vegetarian options, the increased vegetarian, my family has, eats vegetarian sometimes, and I think that's a great option to offer. And I was curious what the proportion of processed, I guess I was mostly thinking of main courses, but sides versus what's prepped. Like I know you were saying there was new staff hired to do like prep work and stuff like that
Yep.
last year, I think. I was curious how much is prepped by the school staff versus how much is.
It depends on the month is the short answer. For September, for example, a decent proportion of it is. The larger proportion of it is processed than not. And the reasons for that is it's hot and we're expecting things to break down, and we're also transitioning into the year, and so it's kind of our soft landing. And so as the year progresses and it gets cooler out, that's when appetites get whetted a little bit more, and that's when we're able to add some of that stuff in. As far as a hard percentage, I don't have the answer for you. Again, it varies from week to week or from month to month, but I can definitely look at the menus and give you a percentage if you'd.
Oh, I was just curious because I know some, like a lot of our menus that have meat-based options. I was wondering, like in those ones, is the meat processed versus, sometimes just looking at the menu, it can be hard to tell how healthy an option is because I feel like it depends on how it's prepared or what.
Yeah,
You know what
I mean, if it's
like
a
chicken nuggets versus like chicken.
Sure,
Like
yeah. If it's a chicken nugget or a chicken patty, then those are most definitely processed. But when we do shepherd's pie, lasagna, roast pork dinner, roast turkey dinner, all of those things are made in-house. We're not buying them sliced and in bags. So we're definitely trying to expand even more the homemade items that we're offering on a regular basis. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would say, having been in other high schools and middle schools in their cafeterias for whatever, for junior achievement, for other things, I was struck by some of them how almost everything looked processed.
Yeah.
Like there didn't seem to be anything, like maybe there was a bowl of fruit, maybe, but everything else, I mean, I was even in a school and I swear they had a McDonald's kiosk in there. I was like, in school?
Yeah.
And it was, so I was happy that my kids weren't there. They were here, so thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Erin? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, gotta find my agenda here again. So our next administrator report, we're back to Julie Nickerson for the Moore Street School Goal Review. Yes, please keep it in English for us.
Yeah, I'll try. So before I get into our goal work, we were asked to report out on how we've used our workplace satisfaction survey. So we reviewed that survey data with our leadership team. We had a retreat this summer. So we looked into that information and what it told us about our school and improvements we could make. On the whole, our data was positive. But we did recognize a need for more team building. So we've established kind of a double whammy around opportunities to promote wellness as well as team building. So we have a group internally just for staff purposes around how can we gather together to move our bodies and just have some downtime around a very stressful job that we do, to just promote balance and self-care. So I think our first event is we're hiking at Bradby Mountain one day after school in a week or so. And it'll be, voluntary, but I invited people to just, whoever's interested to be part of the organization of that, to come, and I had at least 12 or more people, and not just teaching staff, it was a cross-section of people who work across our building, so clearly there's a desire to do that. Another thing we did in response is think about ways to increase teacher choice around PD. And so one thing that we're doing this year is having self-directed study groups to use some of our staff meeting time. So we have additional meeting time that we've had over the last couple of years. And so that was, again, two-part in response to giving people choice, but also some flexibility around how often we meet and when we meet. So the first meetings of those groups happened today. So there's kind of 5 different choices that were generated by the staff around things that are housed under our goals, but more focused around here's what I want to dig deeper into. Any questions around that before I launch into our goal work? So reviewing goals from last year, you'll notice, I'll kind of partner them both, because you'll notice that our goals, well, one goal has stayed the same for the last 3 years, and it was set as a 3-year goal. So that's our academic goal. For this year is goal 1, and last year I believe it was goal 2. So you'll notice in that, as I review it from last year, we were able to move our academic data in reading up 10%. So we're really focusing on student growth. Are all of our students growing the year we would expect them within a year's time? And so if you look at goal 2 on 2018-19, and it's goal 1 on 2019-20, you can see the progression of our hopes were 55%, 65%, and this past year we were able to get 67% of our students to meet that growth expectation. And then there was a percentage that were really close. So I feel like, you know, our trajectory is moving in the right direction, and we're really proud of the work we've been doing. One of the things I think speaks to it is the fact that we've stayed with the same goals and we haven't moved direction. We've really been thoughtful about using our data to really think about, okay, what's our next step to build on the success we've had, but how do we take our learning deeper and how do we move our students on? And most of that learning for reading particularly has been around comprehension and depth of comprehension and the expectations we have on our students of how they talk about their reading and how they talk about their thinking. So that's really been the crux of our work over the last few years. We'll continue with that this year, just because we're not quite there yet, but we're definitely seeing growths in our data as well as in our instructional practices in the classroom. So the kind of action steps are similar. We're not shifting too many things other than, you know, a nuanced focus around what we're going to be working on specifically. Our math data was strong. This is the third time I think I've stood here to say that we're questioning the assessment. We've now made adjustments in that. So the data reflects that we've maintained a strong achievement around it. We've made tweaks to our expectations for this year. So this year will serve as kind of a baseline, a new baseline to see where we will move our children, but we'll be looking at growth particularly. And with the addition 3 years ago now of our RTI math position, we're definitely seeing trends of the gaps are being filled sooner. So the kind of our students coming into first and into second aren't coming with the same holes they have typically or were coming with. So we're definitely seeing improvements in our practice around math too, even though our data point doesn't give us a clear picture of that. So I've kept that on there as that goal. So I'm going back to 2018-19 just because that goal 1 is a goal that doesn't appear in our 1920 goals. So that was in our it was our kind of our lingering goal around our responsive classroom work. So for those of you who have been on the board for a while, we've been, over the past 4 years, we've been really digging deep into learning more about responsive classroom and how that can help support building strong practices so that our students can feel successful at school. So it's a lot of proactive work for setting up clear expectations, so teaching into something, and then we expect it and hold students accountable. And the one kind of lingering piece was kind of how are we bringing this into our academics and supporting practices that promote increased engagement. We kept it just because we didn't want to lose sight of it. Our data was already high. We had 95% of our teachers reporting that they were using those practices regularly. At the end of last year, we had everybody using it. Now we've had some turnover of staff, so we're going to lose it as a goal, but it remains to be a focus as I do my observations in and out of classrooms and colleagues' conversations and things like that. We're always looking for ways to increase engagement and make sure we're providing movement within our instruction. So let me think. So our third goal in 2018-19, sorry, I'm jumping around, was our RTI B goal. So our response to intervention for behavior last year was about implementing the system. Like we didn't have a clear pathway of how are we going to support students when they present with problems and how are we going to provide that intervention. So last year, our SAT team, so our student assistant team, worked on creating that process. How do we collect the data? When do we collect the data? What data do we need in order to formulate a plan that hopefully will work and help a student increase those skills that maybe they're lacking? So we've got that in place now. And now this year with the implementation of our RTIB EdTech, we're now in a position where we're going to be able to run the plan, run the system in a way where we have somebody consistent who's going to respond, somebody consistently who can collate and gather the data for us, and then we can be responding and shifting what we consider to be effective, what's working, what's not, with that data collection. So that's how that goal kind of has shifted into year 2. Last year it was implementation. This year we're going to be really looking at the data we can get from that. One part of that we started to pilot last year was the use of a social emotional screener. So a tool that we can use that helps us look at all of our students, and oftentimes the students who externalize their social emotional concerns we pay attention to pretty quickly, and it's those who internalize their emotions are the ones that oftentimes we get overlooked. So there's 2 parts to that screener. It's the externalizing behaviors as well as internalizing. So it's allowed us to generate conversation around, let's not miss those kids who might be vulnerable, but we're not necessarily drawn to them because they're crying out for help in a way that we can't ignore. So that's really helped us focus the supports that we're offering through our guidance and social work. So we've really been having good conversations and shifting programming. So as we've built the skills of our classroom teachers, so our tier 1 that everyone gets, we're noticing that the kinds of things that our guidance needs to address look different. So it's definitely those higher level needs that need somebody who's more specialized in their training to support. So we're really shifting, okay, teachers now have the skills to take care of this. We know that's happening in the classroom. Now we're going to really target the greater needs with our guidance. So that all is embedded within that goal. We've also, just another thing that we're doing within our social emotional supports is using that screening information to identify, to help us really wrap around kids coming back into this school year and how can we kind of lift them up quickly. So our guidance counselor has really thought about, actually she's created this opportunity for some of our second graders around being ambassadors for our schools. So training them up to be the kids who we lean on when new students come, like giving them these roles of responsibility and feeling important, and then, giving tours to people who come, and just, so we're building skills as we're training them and lifting them in ways that, makes them feel good and gives them opportunities to lead and shine in different ways. Let me just check I haven't missed anything on that one. So the other part with our social emotional piece is that we've seen a need for kind of some parent support and education around social emotional needs of students at this age. One of our struggles is always, when do we do it? When do we do it so that, what time of day do we do this so that it's helpful to parents? So we've sent a recent survey out to ask exactly that. When would the best time be? What kinds of topics are you interested in talking more about? That we can kind of support parents in a way that bringing them together to have conversations, like other people are going through some of these things, but here's what we want to teach you about what we're doing at school that you might be able to transfer to home. So we're kind of looking for those opportunities too. So myself and the guidance council will run those. We did one. Our PTC actually last year had supported some more parent discussions around different topics. The first one of which was around bullying, which gave us some really good insights into this being a gap and a need of, there's a lot of misunderstanding because we're probably not communicating well enough. There was some feedback at those times that the parents who were in the room didn't even realize that guidance was in classrooms and was within this very traditional mindset of you only go to guidance when you really need help. And so we were like, okay, where are we missing this layer of communication? So that's kind of driven that as a decision to kind of help us think differently about what kind of conversations we're trying to have with parents. And then goal 3 is our new goal, and we came to this our opening days of school this year, we, as a whole staff, unpacked our new vision and mission around, okay, a group has kind of been involved in writing this, but we've got to live it. So how are we going to unpack this so that we all understand, we have a common understanding about what this means for our 4 to 8 year olds right here at Moore Street? It was lots of interesting dialogue, lots of good discussions around, what does this mean for us, and what are we already doing really well that we feel really good at, and where's our gap? And so one thing for this year, and there'll be plenty more, but for this year, one of our gaps that we were all really clear on was our involvement with the community and how we can increase opportunities for our students and what that looks like for our youngest students around connecting with the community. So we're really just trying to seek new opportunities, which we've already got the ball rolling with. There's a group of community volunteers who come and have lunch with our students twice a week. And then that group has now also been added to in a more targeted kind of mentorship program. Ties with our social emotional supports too, really looking for students who could need a good role model and a connection and somebody else, another adult that can be trusted and someone to talk to. So we've expanded that with the help of Willow, who's amazing if you haven't met her yet. And then our second graders have already been to town hall and community services to kind of learn more about what's going on in those places. And this time next year, I think Moore Street celebrates its 75th anniversary. And so Christy Johnson, one of our second grade teachers, has been very interested in learning more about that. She has quite the PowerPoint and wealth of information about how this school kind of evolved. And so we kind of see this as an opportunity to partner with Freeport Historical Society. We've already reached out. They're interested in working with us and doing something around how do we celebrate this, how do we share kind of the history of how this school has morphed into kind of what it is today. Any questions?
Thank you for that, and I'm sure we have questions for Julie. I have one while people are gathering thoughts. I know in the past when we have piloted programs, it's been sort of with the thought that if it's beneficial and helpful, it might roll out in other schools. How did you find that social emotional screener? Is that something that will likely get expanded, or is it too soon to say?
Well, I know that Mass Landing are going to be using it this year. And then I feel like it's a little soon. Each school's in a slightly different place, but we've definitely shared and been talking about different things that may and may not work. And I don't know that we're like 100% set that this is the best tool we can use. I mean, there's advantages in it and there's disadvantages. There's a lot of indicators that teachers need to respond to, and it feels a lot. So we're still thinking about whether it's something rather than nothing, and it's certainly helping us drive conversations, but I'm not sure it's like the tool we're ready to be like, okay, we're going to always use this and everyone else should too. So
it was an interesting, when you talked about it, that I think you're, obviously spot on, that the kids that are externally presenting are the ones that clearly get the attention because it's immediate, it's on the spot, but the help for the kids that are internalizing is just as important, if not more so. Yeah. So I think it's great that there's at least a tool that's helping you guys identify that stuff. Molly?
Yeah, I wanted to acknowledge the fact that just in addressing the behaviors that you see, you may miss those kids. So I really applaud the effort to identify emotional needs, not just for behavioral consequences later on for those kids, but for emotional well-being of all the students. And starting this early is so important. So thank you for putting a focus on that. In regards to piloting programs, last year you were piloting the Read, Write, Ink. How did that go, and are you continuing with it?
Yeah, we are. So it went well in a sense of, first year implementation is often clunky. But we're continuing, so hopefully kind of second year in things go smoother. I think, we have absolutely kept it for pre-K. It gives a really nice structure around one piece of literacy development, which is kind of the phonics piece at that level. It went well. There's a lot of parts to it that just part-time programming is we're kind of still talking about, are 2 full days the best way to go? Are we better off with 5 half days? Like, what's kind of getting in the way for things like that? More around, and I attach that to the success of the program. When they're only here Tuesday, Thursday, and don't come back till the next Tuesday, we lose some traction sometimes with some students. So, yes, it was a successful pilot. We're hoping that year 2 kind of feels even better, and we'll see where the data takes us. But I can speak for us. Like, I'm not thinking we're going to kind of change direction. It served the purpose that we would want it to.
Yes, Jen. I wanted to ask you about going back to when you were talking about the parent communication and like trying to create ways, and it got me thinking about 2 things. One is how to attract the parents that need the support, because a lot of times with anything you get the parents show up that aren't the parents of the children that need support, and how you can do that. Like, if you have ideas, if you guys have brainstormed any ways, just little things like how to do homework. That's one thing that I hear a lot from parents who have young children is, they struggle with homework. And I think part of it is that they just don't really know what to do. And those parents aren't typically sometimes the ones that show up, but maybe email or who knows. But I was just wondering if you had any ideas about how to do that.
Yeah, I don't have any great answers, but it's the conversations we're having. We've tried to, not specifically for this purpose, but we've tried to kind of reach out in different ways, and we haven't got a good answer. We try and offer, childcare whenever we're offering something. We know we get way better attendance at things when the children are involved themselves. So, we're still working on that. I know that only a fraction of people read our anything we send out electronically, and on paper, whichever way we do it. I don't think we're getting messages out to everybody. So, it's just constantly trying to figure things out and try something different. Don't have the answers. If you come up with them, let me know.
Laura.
I was going to say exactly what you said, is that the trying something different. I noticed both when you said involving the community, and then also in the social emotional piece, the creating sensory spaces. It just, those things just really struck me, and I was like, such a great idea, because we have so much neurodiversity in our school, and or any school really does, and I just really appreciated that you're kind of trying to approach this from different creative ways. So I saw that and I thought that was really great.
Yeah, I had forgotten to mention that our OT, who we have here, has experience background around the use of sensory spaces to help students regulate their emotions and be ready for learning. And so we've created 2 kind of spaces, because we don't have a lot of space, so we've kind of found nooks and crannies to kind of set these up so that students can go and use them. Again, like, it's a work in progress. We're trying to make sure we're not running before we're ready to even walk around it. So making sure that adults are trained on how to use it, and that we're collecting data, and that students, we get a read on, did that, whatever they chose to do in the sensory space, actually calm them down, or did it rev them up? And in which case, this is not the activity to choose. So we're working through some of those things. But yeah, no, we're fortunate enough to have the expertise and then be able to put those in place too. So, I feel really good about the work we've done has been thoughtful and responsive and then layered so that we're not trying to take on too much. But it's kind of, okay, what will our next step be? And so we've been able to put some of those things in.
Thank you so much for all of this. Not a question, but a comment, just another resource. I think you might have gotten an email from me in another hat that I wear, which is our local Arts and Culture Foundation. So I'm pleased that you're already reaching out to the Freeport Historical Society, but ACAF is a relatively new organization, and one of the charges of that organization is to ensure that our young people are engaging with artistic, creative, and cultural experts in the community, and I chair the School and Youth Committee, so if you have ideas and we can serve you in some way, we would love to have
Great.
that conversation.
Thanks.
I just had a quick comment about outreach and being able to get participation numbers up for like after school getting parents in. And you had mentioned you offer childcare, you've tried that. Have you ever thought of reversing it? You mentioned when it's a child-centered activity, you get more families. If you could maybe, instead of saying we offer child care during the seminar or whatever, that we're having a game night and the kids are invited to the gym, and then while they're doing that, parents could meet. So it's more, you're just kind of reversing how you market the night.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Jen had a good point that Erin does raffles.
Right.
People like to win stuff. I'm a huge proponent of food. That usually gets me places.
Right.
All right. Any other questions for Julie? Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we are on to section 10, board comments and committee reports, board information exchange and agenda requests. This, as you may recall, is just a placeholder in our agendas for folks. If you were on a committee that met that doesn't have a report out scheduled and you want to share something, this would be a time to do that. Obviously, we're pretty early in the school year, so most of those committees haven't gotten up and running yet. Or if there was a topic that you thought might be beneficial to the whole board that you wanted to raise and see if it's something we wanted to either put on our list to discuss at the next retreat or something more immediate, you could bring it up here. Maddie could have discussed the attending last week, the comments from the. No, it's totally fine. The point is that you said it. That's what I appreciate. But I was just saying that is an example of something that could be in this spot here. So I know we have a few newer folks to the board. So just in case you're wondering what goes there, that's what we're talking about. And now I'll see if anybody has anything. Okay. So then we will move on to the Finance Committee report. Kate.
Before I start, Jen, did you have something you wanted to share about Region 10?
Would that have been a good place to talk about that?
We're going to talk about Region 10 a little later, so.
Okay.
Okay, so our first meeting, well, I shouldn't say it. It's not really our first meeting. First meeting of the school year. But we actually met through the summer a couple times, too. We've been working on our cost-sharing proposal and presentation that we're bringing to the board in a couple weeks. We did end up shifting the meetings a little bit. The next board meeting on October 9th, we are going to be coming to the board and presenting more of a background on the ED 279, which is the document that forms the basis of the required local contribution, and that's how we then figure the budget and then what then becomes additional local monies. So we'll walk the board through that because we felt you really need to have a better understanding of that piece before we present to you. So it'll be the meeting following that, October 23rd, that we come and present the the Finance Committee's proposal for the cost-sharing methodology. All right.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So Kate, after you make the actual proposal, will there be additional time at a later meeting for the board to discuss and vote and do all that? How long is the complete process?
I think originally we had it set up that the first meeting would be presenting, and then the next meeting would be a vote. And now we have to probably push a vote to the third meeting.
Right, so I think originally it was the 9th was the presentation and the 23rd was, so after the presentation, clearly folks can ask clarifying questions, we can discuss it, but certainly understand that it's dense material that people likely need some time to process and then come back further and discuss. So I think the plan was at that next meeting we can have further discussions and a vote if folks are ready.
Can you say that again, about what?
If folks are ready.
Okay, but then an opportunity to push that vote to the third meeting in the series?
Right, so it's already scheduled, so the expectation is that we would not be voting the day we present the recommendation to the board, because people will likely need some time to process and think on it and come back with either additional questions or comments, and so, yes.
Just inquiring in the interest of maintaining healthy working relationships with all three towns. Are we providing them with the materials ahead of time as well as letting them know exactly what the schedule is?
Yes, so Kate, we talked about that at today's Finance Committee meeting. Kate's going to reach out to the town managers and the chairs of each of the respective boards to let them know our schedule. And we'll just ask, I believe Ginny already sends the package to the towns when we release it. So, but if she doesn't already, then we'll make sure that it gets to them. Any other finance questions? All right, so strategic communications. Candy's not here, so somebody gonna fill in for her? Valley.
Yeah, I can fill in. We met a week ago, Becky? About a week ago, and we went through all the results compiled that Ginny provided us for the staff survey. For each of the schools, there were two groups, teachers and ed techs. Followed by, for some schools, substantial number of comments. So what we're doing now is, before we present to the board, we are generating a table so that it's easy to read what the responses were for each of the schools for both groups. And we will present to you, but it's great information, and I think people will be interested in getting the responses that the survey generated.
Great, thank you. And policy committee. Who's going to fill in for Candy on that one? Kate? Is that you? Oh, right, or Maddie. Either of you.
Okay. So we did have our first meeting at the beginning of September, and we reviewed a few policies that we didn't have any recommended changes, so we don't need to bring those to the board, but there were a few that we revised, and those we'll be reviewing tonight. Those are the school system goals and objectives and the Board of Directors member code of ethics. And there was one that we weren't ready to bring to the board yet, and that's the last one there, the Board of Directors powers and responsibilities. And I'm blanking now why. We had questions on that. I think there were some ones we needed to run by the attorney. So once we get those fleshed out, we'll make any needed revisions and bring that policy to the board.
Okay, thank you. Which is the perfect segue into the policy review. Cynthia.
Good evening. The first policy on our list was brought to us. It was revised or brought possibly for the first time in 2016, and the nurse group and Craig had approached or contacted me in maybe late winter because they wanted to make a couple of changes to the policy. And so we worked that through in the spring. It was slated to come to the board on June 12th, but for a couple of reasons, it was put off until this evening. So I have with me tonight Craig Sickles and Angela Scalar, who are here to answer questions because she's right there by Bonnie.
We saw her. We were looking for Craig.
Oh, well, she said he was out in the hall. I texted him to come, and so I thought he had walked in. I'm sorry. He's hiding. And so you can see, just briefly before I turn it over to them, or for questions, you can see the change on these student concussions and other head injuries, the actual policy JJIF on page 2. Is in section C, and it's about returning when a child returns after having a concussion, and it says that they, instead of saying may have a gradual, their participation may be gradual, that was changed to will, and we'll have them explain why. And then the sentence truncates right before and the healthcare provider's recommendations, and I'll have them explain why to that. So that's the change on that policy, and that's the only change. And then on the next supporting document, the exhibit, the actual concussion information form, we had a couple of changes there. One, Candy Koch, she's a great grammarian and editor, and so she found on page 1, in the middle of the page, it says fussy instead of fuzzy. And so it should say fuzzy vision instead of fussy vision. And then on the next page, if you think your child has suffered a concussion, there's an added sentence, such return to participation will be gradual. It just aligns with the actual policy, so it's the same sentence. And then we also changed the informational website. It's heads up, so that's accurate now. So I'll open it for any questions if people have questions or want more information about why. So why don't you come on up?
Is Craig going to tell us why, or should we ask him?
Yeah, I'd like to hear the explanation for the change, if there is one.
So when we have conversations in our preseason parent night, one of the things we tell parents is we can't tell you what doctor to go to, but if you want the impact test, if you want the 5-step return to play protocol, then you need to see a doctor who's trained, like the policy says. Quite often, some of the general practitioners are not, so we were finding that kids were coming with a note from their doctor saying they can return to play. Well, in the parents' eyes and the kids' eyes, that means they can return to play. But per our policy, it doesn't mean that. It means they can now start the 5-day, the 5-step return to play protocol. So what we were telling people, what we're telling parents and students is that a doctor's note does not supersede school policy. And so we changed the may to will, which we were always doing in the past anyway. So that kind of clarified that piece. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, it's really just sort of a loophole that we were afraid parents were going to hold us to, because it's not an option. It won't maybe gradual. It will be gradual. If there's a diagnosed concussion, there's a pathway to go, and parents take sports really seriously, and they get really angry when you're trying to protect their kid's head, which is kind of funny. So we just wanted to kind of get that out of the equation and just say this is what we do. Your doctor said you can return to play. That means that we start you out there and we start doing the gradual return to play. It doesn't mean that you start in a game after you've just been out for 2 weeks with a concussion. So it's a little common sense, but we were finding that we were being challenged on it. So hopefully this will eliminate that.
Can I ask a question on that? Having dealt with a kid with a concussion last year, his doctor did put him through the gradual protocol and then sign the paper. So he had gone through start with the low and then gradually increase the level of impact. Would that mean that once he had that note, he would have to start again, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to know what that looked like, because I don't know of a doctor that would do that in terms of, I'm not sure what that looked like, because it really, return to play really means that they're going out with the coach, they're doing their warm-ups, they're gradually kind of getting back into the game of their sport.
Right. So he had him up until the point where he could go practice, right? So he had him run a little. He had it right. So
sure,
it worked through that.
And so I think, and that's great. That sounds like you had a great doctor doing more than most might do in that instance. The usual is we get the note that says, sure, they've been asymptomatic for 24 hours or whatever the protocol is in that doctor's office, and we're going to allow them to return to play. And so, that means they start with that coach on day one, doing the warm-ups and moving, so that we can make that determination, this kid's ready to go back into a game setting. So that's not something that's usually able to be seen in the doctor's office, that's usually experienced that way. So,
yeah.
Do you have?
Was that a high school or middle school incident?
Well, it was a middle school. It wasn't a middle school sport. It was a U.S. Soccer sanctioned event. So, they mandated how the process went. So that's probably why.
Okay. So, yeah.
At the high school level, the doctor and the trainer will communicate.
Yeah. Which I think, I am completely in support of the process, but to Craig's point of finding a doctor who's,
Right.
familiar and,
Right.
and, uses this process, I'd hate to, penalize people for finding the right doctor who walks them through those process before they'll even sign the return to play.
Right.
You know what I mean? So.
Right.
I think a phone call would be made. If we get that note, we would call.
Absolutely.
Either the middle school, the nurse would call, or
Yeah.
at the high school, the trainer would call.
Like, tell us more about this, what have you done,
Right.
because that's not usually the
The
case.
norm, right.
Exactly. So,
Kate.
Yeah, I think my number one concern with this edit had to do with the discussion we had in 2016, which I looked back, in fact, because I wanted to make sure I recalled it correctly at the recording. This particular piece of making sure we weren't trumping a healthcare provider's decision was discussed at this board, and we wanted that in there, and we wanted, I think, Valley, at the time, you had some questions about what if a child or a family didn't have access to a medical care provider, and could our nurses sign off on it? And so I just wanted to make sure that we weren't trying to say that our nurses are providing the final say on it, that you
Right.
have to have that doctor's
Absolutely.
sign off, and then for return to play.
Right.
And then it's
so the doctor is really saying this kid is stable enough to start to go back out and challenge their brain a little bit. And the guidelines for really reaching that point have other things, like, have they academically been caught up? Are they attending school full on, 100%? If we're still doing accommodations in the classroom, this kid should not be being okayed for return to play. So it's really just the beginning line of saying, yep, we've gone far enough in this healing process that we can just start toying with what's out there now. Let's get back, let's move the body, let's see what happens. And a lot of times kids will fail miserably. Like, they'll go out for that return to play stage 1, and they get out there and start doing it, and they're completely symptomatic. And it's our job as nurses at that point, or the trainer, to say, well, we're backing it up. We're not moving you to the next stage. We're going to stay at stage 1. So, nurses can't diagnose. We follow doctor's orders. And so the real wording in this is the doctor's order is saying you may now begin to challenge this kid. And parents misinterpret that and say, my doctor said he's all set. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, no, he's not all set. And that's setting your kid up for an injury because he or she hasn't been conditioned for the last 2 or 3 or how many ever weeks. So, but no, the decision is absolutely coming from the healthcare provider.
Maybe we should change the name of it. Like return to play does sound like they can,
It's a great point. Yeah. It does sound like that.
The other thing we talk with our high school kids is to be honest, because when the trainer is putting them through, the first step is 20 minutes of jogging, then the next step is 40 minutes of higher intensity. And so the kids have to be honest with, how are you feeling? Because what has happened a couple times is the kids will lie and they'll say they're doing fine, and then they get to step 4 and they're not doing fine, so now they have to go all the way back to step 1 again because they've lied and they haven't been honest. So trying to come back quicker, it actually prolongs the event.
Any other? Oh, Lindsay.
In the policy, it says, and in all cases should be based on current accepted standards of care. That seems a little bit fuzzy and general to me and open for a lot of interpretation. Is there a specific document or, protocol that you use that could be listed so there isn't any?
That's a tough one. I understand your concern. The problem is that the literature and it changes, just like a lot of things change in healthcare. When concussion stuff started first coming out, they wanted us to really shut down a kid and, keep them home, keep them screen-free, all of that. And then they were finding that they actually were getting kids really depressed. And there was information and studies that came out that said, actually, it's better to get them engaged a little bit, and it's okay to be at school with a low-grade headache. So those things are changing, and they kind of come down the pike through different concussion, main concussion management initiative, and so it's kind of like best practice, in my opinion, is not sort of listed somewhere in this.
No, I wouldn't suggest listing the specific characteristics, but who is the authority
right,
and what is what are the sources that are being referred to? I mean, it seems vague, or is it just are you just amassing the whole range of literature, and Craig and you are making the decision which ones to listen to?
So I think what this is referring to, the standard of care comes to us from the doctor. So the doctor is basing what the student can and can't do on a standard of care. The other piece of that is, the other standard piece of care is the 5-day step, the 5-step return to play protocol. The NFL does it, the NHL, the NBA. I mean, it's the 5-step return to play protocol is right now the standard of care that everybody is using, whether you're a pro football player or a freshman playing soccer. You're going through that standard of care to return to play based on what the doctor has given you, based on his standard or her standard of care.
Maddie?
And it is a changing thing. It is a changing thing. Nurses go and get, we have trainings that we go to keep up with the latest stuff. And the ultimately the return to play hasn't changed. That since I've been doing this has been maintained, the standard of care.
It just seems like I'm hearing a little bit of conflicting. The term standard of care, it's like on the one hand, you guys are saying, we're getting doctor's notes saying, yeah, go for it. And like, that doesn't sound like an explicit standard of care. It doesn't sound like a 5-step process. It doesn't sound like anything. And then there's this sort of industry-wide standard of care that's being practiced by the NFL, et cetera. I feel like we're using the word standard of care for different things in different moments, and it's just confusing, personally.
I feel that this is an instance where we would keep the policy broad to account for the evolving standard of care, which especially in head injuries is evolving rapidly. And I don't know what to cite specifically here, but I trust that our nurses and our trainers are up to speed on what that is. And I feel like this policy protects us with that change about will from May. It gives the final authority about how that specific child is doing to the people who are seeing them every day.
I agree, because I think one of the things we don't want to do, and we try to avoid this in all of our policies, is put something too specific in there such that if that standard does change over time and becomes more restrictive or something, we don't want to have to go back and adjust our policies to specifically cite that. And we don't want to be sort of boxed into, well, I passed this test and that was what you put in your policy.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we may know better 2 years from now what we want to do. So, I mean, I get your point.
Can I just clarify? I don't want to list the specific things. I feel like as a parent, this language in here would be just as confusing. I mean, I think what I'm yearning for is something like, in all cases, should be based on our school district's current accepted standards of care. Because what I'm hearing from you is that there's a different opinion about what the current standard of care is, and so what you guys are saying is that we have a current standard of care that we implement sort of across the board whenever we get a doctor's note, but maybe that's not what is.
Well, I think it gets hard because it's a, like diabetes. If we could take diabetes and we had a policy, which we don't because we don't, but we have kids that we take care of with diabetes, and it's our jobs as nurses to make sure that we're delivering what's current, what the doctor is giving us, and that changes. Those topics or specific things that we may do shift over time. So I think concussion is in its own world, and it's really challenging because there are doctors out there that really know about concussions, and then there are other doctors that don't. And so I feel like having sort of this, what we know as a very basic standard of care, like no one can argue with the return to play tactics. It kind of normalizes that based on I mean, I had a kid the other day that went and got a diagnosis from a doc that after getting hit with a hockey stick that they had a migraine, so I feel like the standard of care around the return to play just says, nope, we've got your clearance and we know it's all over the board as far as doctor's offices, but this is what we're going to keep as our standard of what we do, which has not changed. No doctor's office would ever argue with that. I don't know if that helps you, but.
I think one of the things that has changed, and here's an example, when we first started with the impact testing, the main concussion management initiative that's run out of Colby, and every school pretty much is using that, we were doing impact testing baseline every year. And so based on the information that they have, the research, the statistics, they now say you don't have to do it every year, do it every other year. So we're now doing it for freshmen and juniors, whereas in the past we did it for everybody. So the standard of, I don't know if it's standard of care, but the standard of how often you test them changed based on the information. So we're only testing every other year, or doing baseline tests every other year.
But I think Lindsay's point is a good one, that, we can set our standard of care however we choose based on best available information.
Right.
And putting those words in the policy makes it clear of whose standard of care we're doing. It's ours, and it gives you the flexibility to adjust that as you get more information. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Right.
Jeremy?
In the policy, right in the second paragraph, it does point to the Maine Department of Education materials. So is learn to play the same as that? I mean, return to play. Learn to play is return to play the same as that.
Whole other policy,
Speaking
learning to
hockey,
play.
yeah. So,
As far as a document from the Department of Education?
right.
The Department of yes, it's put out there as part of the resources that they offer for school nurses and athletic trainers to pull from. Is it a document? It's
No, well, it just refers to materials promulgated
Yes.
by the MDOE. So
Yeah.
if that is that, I think it's covered enough
Right.
because we are following the
Right,
state
exactly.
recommendations. So.
Right.
Where is that, Jeremy?
Just the second paragraph.
The superintendent.
Oh, I got it, yep. Okay. Really small font.
It's okay. You've mentioned the main concussion a couple of times. Is there like a, maybe you could put in here like where you gather your new information from?
Right.
That way at least identifies like kind of a go-to spot for RSU 5
Yep.
when it comes to
I
concussion.
think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Who's the vice chair? Can you call on me?
Lindsay?
I'm wondering why in that particular sentence we've been talking about, in all cases should be based, why isn't that will be? Like we changed the other thing may, and then we're saying should be. It should, but isn't it always?
Where are you?
So this
Sorry.
same sentence, such a return to participant, oh, sorry, yep. Well, no, it's bottom page 1.
C.
Letter C, the last sentence in letter C, the sentence that was changed. So we changed the may to will, such a return to participation will be gradual, not may be gradual. Oh, should be is, no wait, that's my cross off. Yeah, why didn't we cross off should be? And in all cases, will be based on current accepted practices of care. What's the should for? If we're trying to be eliminate or is or is wait, but
And then that same language pops up in the JJIFE.
So do I have to make a motion? This is a first read, right?
No, this is the first read, so they
Yeah,
can.
so I would just advocate for, after the word on, writing the districts.
Can you tell me where
Possessive.
specifically, Lindsay?
So, just to my point earlier, based on, in that last sentence that we've been looking at.
Okay.
Based on the district's current accepted standards of care.
Okay.
Or the district's standards of care. And then you could say based on, which are based on X, Y, Z and other medical and sports.
Okay, so I have on the district's current accepted standards of care, and I've changed should be to is in that sentence, and then on the next one, and what's the third edit?
Such return to purchase.
On RSU 5, current accept, just inserting district number 5
I think
before
it was
current
adding
accepted
the-
standards of fare.
Adding the initiative
Fair.
thing too.
I wouldn't do that because that
Yeah.
name will probably change tomorrow. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
there's
Yeah.
Whose name's gonna change tomorrow?
just the name of the protocol will probably become.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think if
yeah.
it says RSU 5, like you were saying before,
It
and it
covers
already
it.
says earlier that the Maine Department of Education, it covers us for whomever we're getting our current standards of care best practices from.
Right.
Okay.
So just changing it to say, Such return to participation will be gradual and in all cases is based on the district's current accepted standards of care.
Yep.
And then that same language carries over into the E. JJIFE information sheet there. Oh, Mara, yes.
I noticed that on the board policy, it says under C, licensed healthcare provider trained in concussion management. And I couldn't find anywhere on the information sheet where it said the provider had to be trained in concussion management. Yeah, on the form. And I was wondering if we'd want to make, well, I think we'd want to make those consistent, and maybe, like, as a parent reading this, I could see how a provider specifically trained in concussion management would have a different opinion than a provider who didn't have that.
So part of the reason that we changed may to will is because sometimes the doctor's notes are coming from someone that's not trained in concussion management. I think having this in there protects us, saying you should have got a doctor who's trained in concussion management, but a lot of times some of the general practitioners are not trained, and they're the ones that are giving the note that say they can return to play today. And so that's why we changed may to will, even though it says it in here, and I think it should, because that's our expectation. But again, we can't dictate what doctor the parents go to or don't go to. So if they give us a note from a doctor, I don't think we want to say, no, we're not going to accept this because they're not a trained physician, but we're going to accept it, and now we have our backup as the return to play protocol that protects us.
So do we want to take it out of?
What happens, like, time and time again.
Yeah, I could see that, yeah.
It's really hard because we don't know per se which doctor is trained. Any doctor who's a doctor is technically trained in concussion management, but the variant, there's a big variance out there. So I do feel like that's our little caveat to say, whoa, we're gonna go slow to protect your brain.
Should we remove this?
The must then, and maybe that should be a should?
The trained in concussion
think so,
management.
Truthfully, I've always felt a little like, I don't know if they're, I can't guarantee that the doctor with the note is trained in that, and so I agree with that.
Because by default, if you accept the note, you're almost saying, well, you check that box, and, I mean, I think, yeah.
So then on page 1, in that paragraph in our board policy, should we remove the phrase trained in concussion management to make it consistent with the information sheet?
Let's see, it's under C. Or, I mean, I'm not sure we want to remove it in that, because we'd like to keep it in there as a recommendation. And, I mean, maybe it's something ideally trained in concussion management.
So then.
Right here.
Should that also be on the form?
And then add it to the information sheet, right?
Just like, I'm just wondering if they should be consistent, because if it's in our policy, I mean, if I was a parent, I would not go look at the board policy, you know?
Right,
Like,
right.
It does say must receive the brain.
Right, we must receive the evaluation and the clearance, but by having trained, we're also implying that they must be, but we're saying must is, should it be, must receive a brain injury evaluation and written clearance from a licensed healthcare professional, comma, ideally one trained in concussion management and blah, blah, blah. So we can, we understand that we don't know the credentials of every doctor in the state of Maine or wherever they happen to be have seen, but we do want to put out there that ideally you should be see someone who's trained in this.
Ideally trained in, okay. Got that.
Got it?
Yes.
So it would be ideally trained in concussion management. That's the edit, okay.
Maybe am I missing, do they get this part, the parent gets this part and this to sign, or do they just get this to sign?
So you just get, hold on, I just did this.
Showed you the wrong pages.
I don't know.
The 2 full pages are on the online forms.
this page and then.
Yeah, it's like 3 or 4 pages.
Yep, the concussion, so those 2 pages that you see are part of the online form. Everything is there, so we'll have to change the wording on the online form as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Do parents also get a copy of the policy at the same time, or they're just
No.
reading the form?
So you definitely want it in there too. They're gonna,
Well, I just don't see anywhere if we change it in the other, you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
If we change
make
the
sure
other
it
one.
mirrors the same
Yeah.
language. Yep.
So this is a little tangential, but is there any repercussion in the ways of not being able to play later on if the kid is out for a concussion and cannot play? Do they lose their spot on the team for a while, or why is there such push from the parents to get the kids back on the field right away?
Because they want them to play. They don't want them sitting down, they want them playing.
Okay, so we're, as a district, we're not doing anything to create the sense that unless your child is playing, then there'll something, a negative consequence will
No,
come of it.
Yeah, the trainer, at the high school, the trainer is in total command of who plays and who doesn't as far as a concussion, when they can and when they can't return. If the trainer says they can't return, then they're not going to return. And when they can return, there's no penalty. I mean, it's an injury. You're not getting penalized for an injury. You're going to get penalized for skipping and going to Ben and Jerry's free ice cream day. You're going to get penalized for that.
You really penalize them for that? It's the best day of the year.
Well, that's what I wanted to hear, so thank you. I mean, it seemed obvious, but,
Yeah, no coach is going to penalize for an injury.
okay, thank you.
Right. It's
When
one of
they're
those
ready to
things
play,
that
when-
people get super caught up in sports in general, and, you know, like, wow, maybe that was the game that a scout was going to come, and now my kid's not seen, and now they don't go to college on a scholarship, you know.
Yeah, but if the scout comes on the following game when they're back on
Oh,
their
I know.
injury, then
I
it's going to be a lot
completely
worse.
agree. I'm just telling you why people get pretty wound up. So, okay, any other concussion questions?
I have one clarifying question. So on the actual form that's signed, on that sentence, are we putting in the word ideally from a qualified and licensed healthcare provider?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would put the same sentence you have in the policy
Not
in the
there, though,
information sheet that the
because
parents
It has
get.
to be a qualified licensed healthcare provider, but the ideally is specifically trained in concussion management, so I don't think you need ideally right there.
Okay.
Because it has to be from a qualified licensed.
Right,
healthcare
yeah.
provider.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that's
Thank
the
you.
must part. The
So we don't need ideally there.
Specifically trained is the ideally
Wherever
part.
it's listed that it's in concussion management, we'll put ideally.
The only problem I have with that is that, as somebody who hasn't been thinking about this, you know, if you're just a parent and this happens to your kid and you go, I mean, I would think a doctor is trained in concussion management. Like, I wouldn't know that they would need some special certification. They're a doctor. They know
And I
what
don't
a
think there
concussion
is
is for crying out loud. And I would argue that a lot of doctors would say, yeah, we learned about that in medical school. This is what you do for it. You know, like.
They do argue that.
So.
Those are the ones that also say this kid can play in this game tonight.
Right, so I'm wondering, like, if that language in the form even isn't communicating what needs to be communicated, which is, I mean, is there a special certification?
And that's where there is a handful of concussion specialists in the state of Maine that we refer parents. Whenever I get a kid that has a concussion, I give them information and I give them this list of doctors. Whether they choose to go to that doctor or not is up to them. And it's just a handful, like I'm talking like 3 or 4. And so other than that, you're absolutely right. There's nothing that's going to be, there's no special
Designation,
that a doctor is going to have. They're going to say, I'm a doctor, I'm trained in this, period. And so I think that's, again, why we're coming back to that language of just giving us a little bit more control of, okay, well, we thank you, we know they're safe and that their head is okay, but we know best practice for how to get our athletes back to the field. So it's really just a way to protect ourselves most doctors, when we explain what we do, are like, well, yeah, that makes total sense. But they've been pressured by a parent in their office to write a note that says they're cleared. And they don't know. Once the doctor understands our process, 99.9% of the time they say, absolutely, that makes sense. So it's just, again, closing that loophole where the parent who's really gung-ho to get their kid out there that day is really putting their kid in an unsafe situation.
Yeah.
I think that also refers to the impact testing. So there are a lot of doctors who have not been trained in impact testing and how to read the impact test scores. So if we're doing impact testing and that's one tool, then that doctor can't use what information we have. So that's a piece of it as well.
I'm sorry I keep bringing stuff up, but so in the policy, though, it says they must see a doctor on your list, and that's not, and you're telling me that's not happening.
No, any doctor they want, their doctor. We can't tell them who to go to.
But it says.
Right, that's why we're going to change that.
That's why it's being recommended to change that. Because we really have no way of knowing the credentials of, there's no measurement right now.
Right, that was Mara's point.
In letter
yeah.
C, the first sentence of the second paragraph in letter C, the must is being changed.
No, it's not going to change that. So it's going to say, must receive a brain injury evaluation and written medical clearance from a licensed healthcare professional, comma, ideally one trained in concussion management.
Sorry.
No problem. Kate.
I kind of feel like we need to be more upfront with what we're saying in terms of the participation will be gradual. We're trying to say RSU 5 will determine that. And so I'd like to, if you feel it makes sense, unless this is something that just brings it a little too far, is to say that participation will be gradual at our discretion. At the RSU 5's concussion management team's discretion, or the school nurse's discretion, because we don't come out and say that, and it causes, I think, too much confusion. If I just read this and saw participation will be gradual, I'd still think it's based on my medical provider's recommendation.
You don't think that gets picked up by the change that says in all cases will be based on the district's current accepted standards of care? No? Okay.
I agree with Kate.
You got that, Cynthia?
What's the last part?
So
sorry.
I'll paraphrase. So after it says in C, will be gradual, comma, at the discretion of the district's concussion management team, something like that.
Right.
We can wordsmith it in our meeting.
One thing, too, that I think is important, I mean, I haven't had a kid that had a concussion, but I know a lot of people who have, and, you know, this is just policy, and I think that I know for a fact that there's so much communication with the parents and the trainer and the nurse. I mean, so when a concussion happens, I mean, it's not like a parent is left out there to like read the policy to figure out what's going on. I mean, there's so much communication. So I think that we can feel really confident. I mean, I think it's important to have this in policy, but I think that we do, you know, RSU5 does a really good job of keeping that, you know, huge open line of communication on concussions.
So they're not expected to go find our policy somewhere in the bowels of the website.
Yes, but conversely, if you have a willful parent who wants their kid to play, they're going to go dissect policy and see where it falls apart. So it behooves us to make sure this is clear.
Yep.
And I would say that language we just added, we need to somehow put it on the information sheet as well. I think, to Maura's point earlier, that information sheet is just another piece of as much information as we can get parents.
Right, because they're getting that, and they're signing that before there's an issue, right? They're signing that every year before their kid can participate, which is always better than when there is an issue.
So the next time we'll come, I thought it was going to be in here, but there's another form. It's actually the physician's form that we give to the parent and we give to the student to take to the doctor. And it's an itemized list of where they are on several factors. Are they in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4? And then on the backside of that, the doctor then takes that information and categorizes where the student is, what they can and can't do, and then that form is used by the school nurse to communicate with the teachers what the student can and can't do in the classroom, how much testing, how much screen time. That same form is then used with the trainer to help him. Maybe he doesn't have to be placed on the first level of return because they did it in the office and the doctor puts that there. So that's a piece that we should show you when we come back again.
Yes.
Unrelated, I want to know who won the field hockey game. Oh, no.
So we hosted York tonight, who's a perennial state champion. We lost to them last year in the South Regional final. We scored in the first half, so at halftime we were up 1-0. With 20 seconds to go, we were still up 1-0, and they had a corner. Time expired, so there was no time on the clock, but the corner gets to finish, and they finished and they scored. York scored, so now we go into overtime, and York won in overtime.
Oh.
A lot of tears. Tonight.
Yeah, that's rough. Okay. Well, that was a downer. We should have assumed that he didn't come in jumping up and down, that they didn't go as well as we'd hoped. Okay. Any other questions on the concussion policy? Thank you both for being here tonight. I know
The next time it comes.
we have a
will
lot
be
of questions,
the
but
last- In October.
what's that? I know. All right, you guys have what you need on that?
Yes.
Okay, you're going to move on to
We
the
did.
others?
We're going to move on to the other. Okay. So the next one is school system goals and objectives. And that first sentence, the RSU 5 Board of Directors recognizes its responsibility. It used to say to set goals for the efficient operation of the school unit. And the policy committee decided that we should also add in there to develop a strategic vision and set goals. And then we only had one other change in the second paragraph. The administration shall develop appropriate objectives designed to achieve the stated goals. Okay, and then the next one is the one that we talked about at the retreat, Board of Directors Members Code of Conduct. We made some basic, simple changes. We decided that it should say, having accepted the challenge of service on the board, members accept the principles set forth in the following code of ethics to guide and help in helping to provide free public education to children of RSU number 5. And then it just simply says each board member shall, and then we took out I will on all of them. It just seemed to flow better because it felt more policy-like to word it that way. And then we added that last couple of sentences where we would have this policy reviewed annually, and that it would be, we'd develop a form that everybody would sign, saying that they've read and understand the policy. And then if somebody was newly elected to the board, at some point in the middle of the year, that they would sign it during their orientation.
So just to make sure I understand your intent, so the board shall review this policy. It's not that the policy committee is going to look to change this every year. It's we're going to read it and reaffirm our acknowledgement.
Correct.
Okay.
Kind of like the intent was on the retreat.
Yeah.
In that first paragraph that you just read, should we take out the me in guide? Because you're taking out the I, you're saying members accept principles set forth in the following code of ethics to guide.
It should be them, right? Because members.
Yep, thank you. Good catch.
Any other comments on that one? Okay? Oh, Kate?
Well, because of your clarifying question, I think we need to change the word reviewing the policy. If that's gonna make the future board think they need to
Look to change it, yeah.
look to change the policy.
We could just say read
Or acknowledge.
instead of review. Just replace review with the word read.
I'm sure you guys will come up with a word other than review that
We'll
works
put
just
read
well.
in there as a placeholder.
Yeah.
Is that, does
Yep.
anybody not like that?
Okay. All right, so that is all of them, yeah?
Yes.
So I would take a motion for consideration approval of the first read of those policies, subject to the changes we recommended. Valerie, second? Jeremy? All those in favor? None opposed? Thank you. Thanks, Cynthia. Okay, unfinished business. Consideration and approval of the RSU 5 district goals for 2019-2020.
Okay, at the board retreat, in your package, you actually have 4 documents. And if you remember back in June, the document that has climate culture at the top in blue, you did vote and adopt those goals. But then we just wanted to make it, more specific. And so we looked at the retreat at the kind of 5-year plan that at the top of that document it says RSU 5 strategic plan support document. And I said between the retreat and now I would try to create a 1-year plan, right? Because sometimes it's hard to look at a 5-year document and think about what your next steps are. And so based on your feedback, that's what you see in item 12A that looks similar to what you've seen in other years, which is the RSU 5 goals 2019-20, and it has item 12A at the top. And so this is our ambitious 1-year plan. And I'm not going to, you've seen it at the retreat partially parceled out. And, but I do want to bring your attention to 2 of the strategic objectives. The one is around the first goal, around the strengthen and align all social emotional development systems. We're hoping to develop and recommend a plan, and I would want that done before you're voting on the budget for this upcoming year. So that might have a budget implication on that one. And then the other one would be when I was the very last page, the transportation, and talking to Dennis, we're hoping to have that done as we develop the budget, so that if there's there might be a budget implication on that one too. For example, if we figure out a way to do a late bus at Pownell. The rest of them, I feel like we're aspiring to have them done by the end of the year, and I don't see like a big impact on the budget that we'll be building. So we'll be working towards all of those. And then I just think there was discussion about, and I think that's really what we need to talk about. Do you want to vote on kind of the yearly plan? Or do you not feel the need to do that? So that's why you see on your agenda there is a place for a motion, or, we don't have to do a vote.
Historically, we have, right?
Yes.
Do you see any reason why we shouldn't?
So in the past, you voted on the goals, but the supporting document, you really haven't voted on that. And so I'm fine either way, but you have voted on your goals in this document that you did in June.
Those
But-
are our like sort of high-level strategic
Exactly.
goals, and this is what we're going to get done this year to achieve these things.
Yes.
Okay. Maddie?
I would advocate not voting on this. I think I would like voting at the higher level, and I don't think we need that level of scrutiny, sure, but I don't think we need to vote on it.
I feel that if we vote on them every year, there's no reason to change the protocol this year. I mean, it gives us an opportunity to read more closely because we know that we're voting on it. So I don't see any downside to voting on this, and we've done it every year.
I think it also provides the board support for, as the administrators are rolling this out in their schools and districts, that they know that the board is aware and supportive of these initiatives throughout the year. And maybe that means nothing, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe they appreciate it.
I guess I'm feeling it's an administrative detail we don't need. I mean, I guess there's not a downside, but we have voted on our strategic goals. We've voted on it at a high level, and we review, Becky's plan, her performance plan for the year, which is tied to this. So I don't know. It just feels like we're voting on every aspect of it. I don't know that it's necessary, but I guess there's not a downside that I can think of.
I certainly agree with not necessarily needing the support document and all of the sort of deep dive and all of that. I don't think we need to be as involved in the implementation of the goals as much as what the goals are and sort of what you expect the outcomes to be. But Mara?
I mean, can we just vote on the goals and not if we vote on the indicators and that I want Becky or whoever's working on it to feel like you can change those. It's not like the board has to then approve, like, oh, we don't, do you know what I'm saying? We don't like those indicators or something like that.
Yeah.
I guess that is what I was thinking could be the downside. It should be nimble. It should be a nimble document that we don't need to review and discuss for 20 minutes at a meeting because something happens and a goal gets changed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, although what Maura was saying is that if an indicator gets changed or an action strategy, then we don't really need to be rediscussing that. But if the goal gets changed, then maybe we do want to be discussing that. So I'm with Maura on voting on the goals the way we always do, but not necessarily holding anyone accountable to follow exactly to the letter of the law the way the action strategies and the person responsible and the progress indicators are spelled out on this document.
Yep.
So you have voted on the goals. Right.
We have for the
I know
whole
that.
plan.
My thought was
No,
that we had
no.
shifted course because we now have a strategic plan. I was thinking that we had up-leveled our game because we're thinking bigger picture, and I was thinking maybe with having done that, we didn't need to have so many administrative votes
No,
down
I
the
think
line.
I
I like Maura's
Well, I
suggestion.
think I just want clarity because I think I'm agreeing with you, Maddie, and what Valley is saying. If you're voting on the goal, I'm just going to read one. Goal 1, all RSU 5 students experience a joyful learning climate that is safe, nurturing, and fosters curiosity. That is on this page that you've already voted on. So if you're leaving the action strategies nimble so that if we start working on the social emotional development systems, right, that's an objective, and we get to the action strategies and, oh, this is going to take us longer, we're not coming back and then re-voting.
No,
Right?
yeah.
And so if you're not voting on the action strategies and you're just voting on the goals, you've already voted on the goals.
So I think we're skipping over what in my mind is the important one, which is the strategic objectives we're focusing on this year, right? So we have approved
Okay.
the upper level
Yes.
goals as you talked about, but we're not doing every of every objective, because that would be insanity to do it in a year. So, I mean, what I don't want is, my fear is that by never re-voting or looking again at the goals, it becomes a strategic plan that we don't necessarily review again for 5 years, and we're like, oh geez, we didn't get half of these objectives done. Whereas we can say, okay, these are the goals we've all agreed on over the next 5 years, and these are the objectives we're working on this year, right? So it's really the objectives we're going to review for this year.
So that would be, so that I think would be, if you're voting on the goals and objectives, that would be different, and that would be fine.
And that would leave you
And that-
the
and then there
nimbleness.
would be a purpose.
Is nimbleness a word? I don't think so.
I think it is.
Is it?
Well, the-
Flexibility, there we go. We're all looking at Rhea.
The author. We're looking at the author.
So additionally, I mean, there may be years when we don't do all the goals and all the objectives, where we say, you know, we're going to focus on these 2, not on all 5. So I want to know that year that, okay, we're focusing on these 2. We made a purposeful decision to just isolate a couple that are more important for that particular year for whatever reason. So I think it's important not just to vote one time for the 5 years following and not scrutinize a little more what we're doing exactly every year.
No, I would agree with that. And all the objectives, if you look at this, are not in there for this year, right? So I think as long as you make your motion specific about we're voting on the goals and objectives as outlined in the 1920 document, I think that would be great.
Anybody feel strongly against that? Or doesn't have to feel strongly, just feel against that? No jumping up and down. Okay, so then perhaps I would be looking for a motion for consideration and approval of the RSU 5 district goals and strategic objectives for the 2019-2020 school year. Maddie, Kate, any other discussion?
So I have one question.
Yeah.
And you may have already talked about this, but when we say the evidence will be improvement on assessments collected on district scorecard, when are we going to define how much improvement? How are we defining improvement? So the language the way it's now, it's very appropriate for like a strategy, high-level thinking, but at some point I would like to know a little more. I would like to have a little more clarity in terms of, okay, exactly what do we mean when we use that word or that other word? It doesn't have to be now, but.
No, I think I can address that because I think we might have talked about it at the retreat.
Yeah.
That when we get into, as you can see, each objective kind of follows the same: identify, explore, make a recommendation. When we get into the recommendation of the plan, that's where we'll have more specific indicators for success.
Yeah, and that was my fault, because you did ask me the answer to that. And I think that the general discussion at that retreat was that until we really know what the state of affairs is for any given strategic objectives, we can't really define what success looks like.
Right, so what you're saying is we don't have benchmarks yet for where
Right.
we stand. Okay.
We might, but we don't know. Right?
We could already have it.
Depending on when we start aligning it in the plan, you know, we might have a benchmark and we can then say for this one, we're going to improve by that so much, or it could be we need to establish a baseline, depending what the plan is.
So we have a motion on the floor from Maddie and a second from Kate and a question from Kate.
I just want to reiterate that I would like to see the goals posted on the website, and then I guess it was the retreat we discussed the communication of the goals and which ones we're planning to implement, at least in the short term, so that folks know that all that work we're starting to implement this year. It won't all be done this year, but these are the ones we're doing.
Right. And I think this specific discussion helps us do that, outline what those look like. Yes, Rhea?
So I have some questions or comments about goal 1. I see that in the 5-year plan we have, this is really pertaining to me, that we have a student representative on objective 1.2. However, in this year's goal and strategic objective 1.1, there isn't a student representative for to strengthen and align the social emotional development of systems. And I'm thinking that since this is a policy that will directly affect the student body, I would strongly urge there to be a student representative on that committee.
Good catch.
On 1.1? Yes. It's just that the student won't be, so it doesn't mean this is who's going to be doing it. It's just like who's going to own it, right? So, but I agree, we want student voice on those.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole 1.2 is really just not any specific item, but just increasing student voice in general, of which you are a perfect example. So thank you for that. Yes. Okay, any other questions? So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? None opposed. Thank you. Okay. So unfinished business 12B. Here we are back again at Region 10. And I'll just sort of summarize where we are in total, and then we'll have 2 individual votes, or maybe we can vote them together, about the 2 members of the Region 10 board, of which, as you may recall, our last meeting was around could one, we learned that one of them had to be a board member, one of them could be a community member. We asked the question of whether the board member could be a shared position based on scheduling, and the answer we got to that was no. It had to be one identified board member from RSU 5. And then the other question, which I think we don't know, okay, was the finance committee member, did that have to be the board member or not? So we're not sure of the answer to that just yet. Did you find that out?
I think they do similar to, Kate might know the answer to this too, similar to what we do, which is they have several committees, so I think that you can move committees, but, oh, you mean if they need one from every town or something?
Right, I believe someone has to be from every
Yeah.
town. What we weren't sure of was, does it have to be an elected member to serve on the
Oh.
finance committee to sign on behalf for warrants, et cetera?
Okay, didn't get the answer to that.
That's okay. We will learn the answer. We will all learn together. So I think we have good news on all fronts. Karen Van Nostrum, who some of you may recall have been on the board with her in the past or seen her around town. She's a resident of Freeport, and she has graciously volunteered to serve as the community member representative for RSU 5 on the Region 10 board, which I think is great news. She served on that board when she was on this board, so I think she'll be able to jump right back in and get up to speed pretty quickly, which is wonderful. So that leaves us with the RSU 5 board member representative. I think this is going to spur a larger conversation around committee assignments and what committees we have, and do we have enough bandwidth amongst the 11 of us to support all the committees that we have. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more at our next board meeting on the 9th. We've done a little bit of research on what do we have for boards, who's serving on boards, how can we make sure it's equitable and we're not burning anyone out. But for tonight, I wanted to open up. Did anyone have a huge change of heart and decide that they would really love to do the Region 10 board? Maura.
So Michelle and I discussed that so you probably all saw Kate's email about the MSBA position opening up later in the fall, and we had discussed me potentially putting my name forward for that. So I could not do both that in Region 10, but I could do Region 10 and then hold off on doing MSBA if that is the board's preference. Since we have to have a Region 10 representative, but MSBA, well, first of all, there's no guarantee that I would get elected or chosen if I put my name forward. And then, of course, that's not something we have to do as a board, unlike Region 10, right? Yeah.
Right.
Which we need to, yeah.
Jen.
I did attend the first meeting of the year for the Region 10, and I just want to say, just for everybody's kind of information on the Region 10 right now, is that I think that the community member's great, and they're very excited about her coming back because a lot of them know her. The second thing is they're toying with a strategic plan, which I talked a lot about our strategic plan. So I think that the person from RSU 5 is going to be really valuable to that board for that reason. They're also doing kind of a big overhaul of renovations, and they have, Honeywell came and did like a presentation on, how to, make the building up to par. And then the last thing that they really focused on or want to focus on is how we have 3 communities that come together, but Region 10 has also, I don't know how many, but lots of communities that come together there. Is it 3?
It's Mount Ararat, Brunswick, and us.
Okay, so those 3 communities coming together, and they're trying to look at streamlining some things with like scheduling and students, getting their schedule changed day 1 of high school, and how that affects Region 10. But I will say that they said Freeport High School is very, I think we're doing the best job at that. So I just wanted to share that and what direction that board's going. I think it'd be very interesting to be on that board.
So I will just put out there that if as a board we feel like it's important to have representation on that MSBA board, then we would need another person to step up for Region 10, or if not, then we can graciously accept Mara's offer. Yeah.
I would like to make a motion to nominate Maura to be our rep on Region 10.
Do we have a second? Jen? Yeah.
Are we going out of order on the agenda? Do we have to do Karen first?
Or you could do a motion for both, right? Do we really need 2 separate? Fine, we'll do 2 motions.
Sorry.
So would you like to rescind your motion?
If that streamlines the process, yes, I would.
So we'll start with Karen. Do we have a motion for consideration and approval of Karen Van Notstrom as the RSU 5 community member representative to the Maine Region 10 Technical High School Board? Valley. Second from Kate. All those in favor? Enthusiastically, yes. Thank you, Karen. So I would take a motion for consideration and approval to nominate Maura Pillsbury as the RSU 5 board member representative to the Maine Region 10 Technical High School Board. Valley. Second from Jen. All those in favor? Thank you, Maura. I think, yes.
Deserves applause, for sure.
I would tell you, Jen, they really enjoyed having you there. They told us. If you were the rep, they would be really happy with that.
It's very flattering, but I'm good.
But this has really raised the discussion about board participation, community participation, committee participation on the board, and trying to ensure that, as you guys can see, we have quite a few committees, and really prioritizing the ones, A, that are required by law, B, that we feel are really important to RSU 5, and then if we don't have the capacity to support all of these committees, beyond those really high-level ones that are required, should we consider eliminating some? Should we reduce the number of board representatives on some? Are there different ways that we could achieve the same work without having it as a committee membership? So we'll talk more about that at our next board meeting, because I think it's something we want to sort of start now, so that when we're doing this again in June, we don't have this issue. So, Okay, thanks for everybody, and most of all, thanks to Karen and Maura. I think you're going to really like it. Okay, so new business. Consideration and approval of a delegate and alternate to the Maine School Boards Association Annual Delegate Assembly at the Maine School Management Association's Annual Fall Conference. Jeez. Do we have a motion? I'm not reading it again. Oh, yeah, that's right. So this is what we're talking about. We're just going to name people. Yeah. All right, so so is this in everybody's folder or is this just in mine? Does everybody have this? Okay, so it is October 24th, 25th, is that right? You'd think it'd say it at the top here. Yeah, 24th and 25th, so it's a Thursday and a Friday in Augusta at the Civic Center. This is what I think we talked about it at the retreat. Becky mentioned it in her superintendent's update. This is the big conference they put on every year for board members and superintendents. There's a lot of learning clinics, there's a lot of education to be done, and you have a preliminary clinic program here. But one of the other important things that happens at this conference every year is on Thursday afternoon is the delegate assembly, which is each district that's a member, which is all the districts, they send a delegate and they discuss and vote on the proposals, which you guys have proposed resolutions, 13B. So we're going to talk about those next, but the delegate is the person who is the representative for RSU 5 and votes as we discuss as a board this evening. So we designate a delegate and then an alternate in case something were to happen to the delegate, like they got sick. And so in order to be the delegate, you have to be willing to commit to being there at least Thursday afternoon for that delegate assembly, which I think is usually later in the afternoon, so 2:30 to 3:30, but I would say don't plan on being out of there before 5, so because it tends to run long. So do we have anyone who's planning on going and is willing to be the delegate? Candy usually does go.
I plan on going, but it bums me out that the delegate has to miss these clinics, because, I mean, I'm looking at the 2:30 time spot on Thursday, and there's at least 3 things that I really want to go see. Instead of sitting, I stepped into that meeting for a moment last year, and yikes. It was not a fun meeting. I don't really want to be that person. I want to go learn.
We don't have to, but we obviously lose our vote on the resolutions if we don't have a delegate.
How close are those discussions? How much decision-making actually happens there versus rubber stamping?
Oh, no, quite a bit.
Really?
Yeah, to your point of there was a pretty substantial discussion around one of the resolutions last year, you may recall, is the $40,000 minimum wage. As mandated for teachers, and it was a very interesting conversation. So I mean, I've been to it a couple of times. There have been some that were much more streamlined. You know, sometimes the interesting conversations are really around the MSBA and the management structure there, but it certainly can be. I mean, I'm not sure I was going to say, I'm not sure if folks have had a chance to read the resolutions yet. I would say there's not a ton of heavy lift resolutions on it this year, so maybe, it's not as critical of a year for us to have representation. I plan to go. I went last year, even though I think Candy was the rep, just to sit in and listen. So
I really do recommend going. I mean, I learned so much. It's so helpful to hear from other board members and other superintendents. You just learn
the conference in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of things, right? So I think if you're able to make it, even if you can't make it to 2 full days, just tell Ginny you want to be signed up. You'll be on the list, and you can, I have in the past, because I can work out of our office in Augusta. I've dropped in and out based on what I had going on. You know, the keynote speaker is usually very interesting, and that's first thing in the morning on the first day. So, you know, if you're able to make it even for part of it, I would recommend going. I know two full days is a big ask, but even if you can go for part of it, I would recommend it. You know, I'm happy to be the delegate if others don't want to do it, because I plan on being in there anyway, because I think it's usually an interesting conversation. But I'm happy to, if someone else wants to do the delegate, great. Or maybe we make Maddie the alternate, just in case, you know, I'm unable to fulfill my duties as yeah.
Oh, I plan to go. I can be either the delegate. I don't know what I'm doing. No clue what I'm doing, but I could also be the alternate.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, just like to echo, it really is very useful. Just sort of to get the sense of how everybody's struggling with a lot of the same issues, and the clinics, or what do they call them? Clinics, do they call them? Really are excellent breakouts to look into things that we run into every day here.
And they usually do, and I'm sure they do on here, they'll do like a regional one where, you know, some of the things that we're facing aren't necessarily the same issues that schools in Caribou are facing. So they'll have regional meetings where it's, you know, our cohort really. So those are, I find those to be interesting as well. So, yes.
Just a question about the clinics. Do you have to pre-register, or
Nope.
can you just kind of
Yeah.
pick and choose as
Yep.
you're there? Okay.
Yeah, like, I know in the past, Becky and I have, you know, at breakfast been like, all right, we want to go to these, so let's split. You go to this one, I'll go to that one, and then we'll cross-share information. So, yep, so you don't have to decide ahead of time. Do we have anyone else who wants to be the delegate or the alternate? All right, Lindsay, your pick. You want to be the delegate or the alternate?
Throw her in.
You think it make her, okay. You know, this one isn't one that you'll probably, I mean, because how it works is it's a conversation, somebody makes the motion, and people really get up and share what their board has indicated. I assume it's what their board has indicated for them to share. Maybe it's their own opinions, I'm not sure. But, you know, these ones aren't huge lifts, so it probably wouldn't be one that would require a lot of advocating on your part. But, so you want to be the delegate, and I'll be your support person? Okay. Okay. So then the motion is for consideration and approval for, all right, I'm going to say your last name wrong. What? Well, I know her first name. I want to make sure I get her last name. Fertney. Okay. For Lindsay Fertney as our delegate to the MSBA Annual Delegate Assembly, and myself as the alternate. Lindsay? Second? Maddie? All those in favor? Yep. You can vote for yourself. And for me. All right, thank you. Ginny needs to know by a week from tomorrow to register folks. So. Highly recommend it. Mara, yes.
And then do we have to talk about?
Oh, we're gonna. It's on there.
Oh, it is.
Yep.
Oh.
That's next. What a good lead-in. So 13B is a discussion of the MSBA 2019 proposed resolutions. So that's the green sheets that's in your packet. How we've done this in the past is really just provide some direction to the delegate on, you know, yes, we're in favor of this, no, we're not, we'd like more information, kind of thing. So the first two are around social media. So the first one is around staff use of social media. So the MSBA supports so how they write these is They write the resolution, then they get the vote, yay or nay, at the delegate assembly, and it really drives their lobbying efforts for the upcoming legislative session, things that they want to raise and talk about. So the MSBA supports development of local board policy and guidelines around the appropriate use of social media by employees during the workday and outside of work, and expectations and consequences for staff using social media to bully or disrupt the school learning environment. Schools need to be clear about who has authorization to create and monitor the school-sponsored sites on Facebook and other platforms, and are encouraged to do appropriate training for staff around good digital citizenship. I'm not sure there's too much we could disagree with that, but I will leave it up to you guys on, anybody see an issue with supporting? Yeah, Kate?
My one issue is more with the wording and the place of where it says "and outside of work," and whether or not they could consider moving that to the end of that sentence. I have an issue with board policy around the appropriate use of social media by employees outside of work. But I'm okay with a policy that says that there are consequences for staff using social media to bully or disrupt the school learning environment during the workday or outside of work.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like very slight change, but.
But I think we do have in our policy about consequences for what people post on social media outside of work, don't we?
I do think there's something, just based on, I can think of one
But this
situation.
resolution.
But I can't quote the policy right now.
Okay.
But there are consequences for posting outside of work on social media if it's inappropriate. Well, I think I could think of two now that I'm thinking of it. Yes.
You can't have a teacher outside of work posting like hurtful things about categories of people, or because it creates a hostile environment, relationship during the school day, knowing that it's out there.
That's what I said. I said I'm okay with it pertaining to the consequences, but I don't think the policy should get into the details of personal use of social media outside of work. But that there will be that there can be consequences if it's going to affect the school learning environment.
Right. Okay.
However, the resolution only speaks to the fact that school districts would come up with any regulation guidelines. So this only authorizes each district to do that plan. So we could write whatever we wanted in our plan. So that's definitely a good conversation to be had, but I don't think we need to figure out right now what we would write. This just gives us the opportunity to write it.
Right. I think this prompts the MSBA to start their sample policy, which is how the basis of most of ours. So then, as we tend to do, we tweak and reword as we see fit. So, but yes, I think your point is well taken. Yeah.
I suspect if anyone is going to come out against this, it's going to be on the basis of worry about free speech rights of our employees. What's my point? I don't know. But I'm in favor of saying yes for this policy, and I think we can write it in such a way that we're not attempting to limit free speech of our employees.
Okay.
Because we would write it to reflect impact on our student learning environment. I think we'll debate that in our meetings.
Yeah, which is fine. I just am surprised that the board would vote to support the resolution as written without intention to then implement a policy that follows.
See, the way I read it was that use of social media either during work or out of work, I think it all relates to the bullying and disrupting of learning environment. Like, the way I read it was they all relate to that. And so, I mean, where the words are in here doesn't change the meaning to me from what you're suggesting.
And I'm heartened that they say development of local board policy. They don't just use the word local, but they use the word development, which I think gives us leeway to develop policy that suits our. Do you mistrust that they're going to then try to shove something down our throats that we don't agree with?
Well, they can't. I mean, we choose to take their policies or not, right?
Yeah, I just don't agree with going there and not at least saying, you know, well, maybe it's just my opinion, the board's opinion that we don't agree with setting board policy that restricts an employee's use of social media outside of work. Unless.
And I think that's the way this is, the way I read this is how it is.
No.
But, I mean, that's interpretation, right? So.
Right, so why can't we make a recommendation at the delegate assembly that they clarify their intent?
We can.
Yeah.
Right.
See, Lindsay's going to be a piece of cake.
Lindsay's like, could we have voted on this after? She's like, I'm sick. No. See, Kate was going to make me get up and say all sorts of stuff.
You'll be there. Can you talk?
No.
You can't?
Nope.
Only the voting.
Only the voting delegates can talk. Yep. Okay.
I guess if I'm going to be the delegate, I need to I don't understand if it's outside of work and it involves utilizing social media to bully or disrupt school learning environment. I don't understand how that disturbs you.
That doesn't disturb me, but that is not how it reads.
It's the wording that Kate has a problem with, not the actual intent.
So I wrote down what Kate wants us to mention. I got it. Okay, you guys ready to move on to the next one? More social media, but our social media. So in recognition that many school board members use social media to communicate, the MSBA would like to affirm the same standards apply to social media as other more traditional means of communicating. Those standards include making clear you are speaking as an individual and not on behalf of the full board, directing concerns and complaints about the district to the administration, conducting yourself online in a manner that reflects well in the district, using caution about inadvertently revealing confidential information, avoiding altogether conversations about contract disputes, investigations, or other matters where the board must be impartial in its deliberations, and remembering that if a quorum of a board is discussing school business on social media or via email, it constitutes a meeting. Yeah.
I say if you've read the paper in the last year, you might be in favor of this, and I am.
I think we should be in favor of it no matter what the paper said. I mean, it seems all pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So.
And I think it just supports the code of ethics that we just reaffirmed. So, all right. It's interesting that the first two really aren't legislative at all. They're more just policy related. But all right, so number 3, legislative focus on students. The MSBA would like to stipulate that legislators and our own legislative review committee view every legislative proposal affecting public education through the lens of whether or not it is in the best interest of the students they serve. The impact on children shall be spelled out in both the language of the proposed law and in the testimony we present. If the legislation does not have the student's best interest as its focus, it should be redrafted or rejected. This proposal should be in the form of a resolve voted on in the second session of the 129th legislature. That's interesting.
So I have a question. Are they saying that only the legislation that they propose, the MSBA proposes, needs to be held to that standard, or any legislation that goes in front of the Education Committee?
I think any.
Well, I think they're overreaching then, because the role of testimony is to basically highlight the impact on different groups of people. But you can't just force the law to be written taking into account one group that may be ambiguous to whoever's writing the legislation. And I don't know if you can even do this just for the laws that are proposed to one committee and not the rest of the committees.
So they're only, I mean, proposals affecting public education. So can you give me an example where a law proposed for public education shouldn't necessarily be in the best interest of students?
No, it should. The rationale is spot on. What is not spot on, in my view, is that they should spell it out within the legislation. I think that should be part of the discussion, but it shouldn't necessarily be required to be included, written in the legislation.
Okay.
So the most recent one, I think, that comes to my mind is the right for teachers to strike, right? So I think what this is saying is that the board, that they want any legislation rejected that isn't looking first to students. And the right to strike, I would argue, is first in the best interest of the staffing, and secondly, to students. Because if they have the right to strike and kids are out of school in a district for a couple of months, that's a really negative impact on students.
That is true, but I assume that someone from the educational world will come and point that out during discussion as part of testimony.
Right.
So,
I'm just reading this to say that you would, the impact on students should be spelled out, and if the legislation does not have the student's best interest as its focus, it should be redrafted or rejected. I think we're saying the same thing. Michelle was just wanting a specific example, right? So that's the one that comes most readily to mind.
I mean, the part that I find also confusing is that there may be different groups of students, and the legislation may affect some and not others. So how do you define which students? And what if the legislation pits one group of students against the others because it's funding for, I don't know, a certain group of students and not the whole student population of the whole state? Then how do you define that impact and who it benefits and who it harms? I don't know. I think it's just a little too much.
Yeah, it is pretty broad. Beth?
I guess I was just going to question, there could be, different ideas of what's in the best interest of the students.
Right, because there is a case to be made that if teachers were to strike, then they might get different contracts, in which case maybe they would attract better teachers than what you could get if you paid nothing, and, Right. There's a case to be made that everything could be potentially in the best interest. So it's a matter of whose perspective. Lindsay?
I just feel it feels overreaching to me. I feel like the legislative process shouldn't be limited by filters before you even have an idea. Like, let people bring their proposals to the legislative process and let the process play its course. It just feels like a little bit over-controlling to me. But I have a hard time imagining a scenario where I would kind of disagree with what's written here. But I mean, it's a big world out there full of lots of ideas. I mean, I can't think of them all right now.
Kate?
I think I'd be okay with it, except for the last sentence where they want to push for it to be a resolve in the 129th legislature. I don't know if like a resolve is some sort of like binding agreement for legislators, which I think that yes, that would be like overreaching. But I think in general, as a resolution, I don't see a problem with it other than this already stated fact that who decides what's in the best interest of the student.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I could certainly see them wanting to hold themselves as a committee to that standard, but to say that every legislator in the state. Maddie?
Yeah, it sounded good on face value, but I appreciate the example. You know, as a person with an advanced degree in human resources and the history of our labor movement in the country, I would have a really hard time, even as a school board member, I would have a really hard time taking away right to strike from anyone in any field. So I can't imagine that scenario, and this, it doesn't feel right. It feels like a new Department of Education potentially laying the groundwork for their future action.
Yeah.
Becky? I think teachers already do not have the right to strike.
That's correct, but during the last session, there was a bill that was put forth to give them the right to strike.
Right. I just wanted to clarify, because
Yes, they don't.
I guess I misunderstood. So you would support legislation to strike?
I would wrestle with it as a student of history.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that was just a question.
Yeah. Okay, so am I feeling the sentiment of the board is that we are not a fan? We do not want to support this resolution? Okay. And our comments around it are, it feels a bit overreaching of their powers, and that there's a process in place that, you know, we would hope that our legislators would clearly look to the best interest of the kids when they're reviewing potential laws. Okay. So board teacher relations. The MSBA is committed to providing training and support to its members on ways to validate and improve the meet and consult process while adopting or amending education policy. The goal is to improve communication around key policies that most directly affect teachers and review and collaborate with staff on policies that need updating. In concert with that effort, MSBA would like to encourage and help train boards in interest-based bargaining to further support collaborative relationships between school boards and our teaching staff by welcoming their input. We also believe boards should create more avenues to provide teacher voice. And obviously, see down in the rationale, the school board's legal right and responsibility to adopt education policy was challenged this year in the legislature by a bill that would have made the adoption of policy negotiable. The bill was passed but vetoed by the governor. So the vote should serve notice that more needs to be done to engage teachers in the meet and consult process around educational policy. Also underscores the importance of opening up better lines of communication between administrators and teaching staff. I hope that as a district that we are on the pendulum or the spectrum, we're not on the side where we aren't communicating well with our teachers and our staff. You know, I think our past few negotiations have shown a pretty solid collaborative effort from everybody's side, and I think one of our goals to increase teacher voice really speaks to the same thing. But how do we feel on basically they're just saying they want to provide more support and training.
That was my question do they need a resolution to say we're here to help you and we can train you? I don't understand why this is a resolution.
I think it's similar to the policy ones up above. I think they want to, you know, instead of setting their course and going with it without getting the buy-in from the members, like, hey, we see this as a potential gap or need. Are you guys, do you agree? Would you like that support and that help and in creating that training? So, Kate.
Do you have examples of what is considered educational policy?
Workday time?
Yeah. Thought that maybe there could be a few people, new members that.
Yeah, so educational policy is things like the time of the workday. It's how many courses you teach. So like a high school teacher, it could be prep time.
Yeah, I think there was something with the prep time, and interesting enough, we do have something in our contract, but a lot of districts do not. The other thing that just kind of catches my eye on that one is it talks about the training. It seems like they're kind of encouraging the interest-based bargaining, and that's not what we have traditionally done.
No. Although I would say that having obviously not been involved with a ton of contract negotiations, I think we kind of do more of a hybrid than the very traditional. No?
No, I think we've had a positive experience, but I just, you know, when I see that interest-based, it doesn't, it's, I've only been involved in it once, but it really is different in that it's like, what is the problem to solve, and then you work from there. You don't come in with your ask, which is what we've kind of done.
Right.
And so when I read that, I'm wondering if that's what they mean, but I don't really know.
But Becky, would you be opposed to the MSBA training districts on any kind of negotiation tactic?
Oh, no. You know, I think that every board should be open to trying
whatever works,
you know,
for them.
whatever kind of
Right.
works for them. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I've seen it work really well in interest-based. It's just not what we've done since I've been here.
Yeah.
But do you feel like having this resolution would hamper us in any way from choosing whichever method
I
we
see.
want to use?
Oh, I see what you're asking me. No, I think what they're just saying is that if we adopt that resolution, we understand that they're going to be providing support and training us, and I think it still would leave wide open after we get trained. Is that the avenue we want to go down? Because probably there are board members here that don't really understand what interest-based negotiation is.
As someone who is part of a union that does interest-based negotiations, it's terrible, and that's why I don't have a contract with my job right now. But being a part of the support negotiations last year, you know, it really did actually, and I was talking to someone at work about this, and about how really positive our negotiations are, and how it really feels like a give and take, and it really feels like, you know, two groups coming together with good best interest. And the way we bargain our contract is interest-based, which is that, you know, it's very kind of, it's very fighty. I know that's not a word, but so I would.
It is nimbleness.
Yeah, right. So I just would say that the way we do our contract negotiations, the one time I've been a part of it, is really great. So and I have something to compare it to, is I guess what I'm saying.
Which is interesting, because I think the whole premise of the interest-based, so it's supposed to be less adversarial, like my side versus your side, but you're saying that it creates more of that, which is great input for us to say, okay, we've seen or we've heard or we've learned about both, and this is what works for us. So, yeah.
So it sounds like we would direct Lindsay to keep her ears open in that conversation to see if that comes up. But the way this reads, just on face value, it looks like what they're trying to do is say, last legislative session highlighted a problem, and this is how we are going to attempt to deal with that problem. So I would have, if that's indeed what it is, I would support it. And just as a footnote to that, I think this whole discussion underscores the importance of us being more involved in what's happening legislatively, because it would be good to be in the know, because sometimes these things might be referring to something that happened that we currently don't really know about.
But it sounds that we want to lean towards no if the focus appears to be on interest-based bargaining. Is that am I hearing that correctly too?
I'm not necessarily hearing that. I'm hearing that we would have enough freedom, even if we support that resolution, to choose any method we want. We'll just learn from MSBA.
Oh yeah, no, of
about
course we would.
Interest-based, and then we can do whatever we want.
Mm-hmm. But would we still want to not support this resolution if it looked like the focus of it was
the interest-based bargaining? I mean, really the only word that bugs me in this is would like to encourage and help train boards. Like, I would be fine if it was MSBA would like to help train boards on, and encourage the most appropriate model for them, kind of thing. But absent that, and Lindsay can certainly make that suggestion, I don't think it's overall worth a no vote. Like, we can make our suggestion like, hey, we appreciate you wanting to train people, and we're good with that, and we might even take advantage of it, but we don't want to necessarily say that that's the road for everybody. So, folks comfortable with that? Kate?
Yeah, I think that was kind of the point I was trying to make with the first resolution as well, that, just having one or two words in there can change the direction of the resolution. And I would agree that, the word encourage in there, if we could see if other board members would be open to removing that. I'd like to see that, especially if this is, again, if our board feels like that might not be the way we would want to go, then why would we support the encouragement of that?
Yeah, and maybe it's, like to train boards on alternative bargaining methodologies or something, right? So it's not simply that one, but because I think, even more traditional bargaining would be an interesting, I actually think they have classes on that already though, so maybe that's why that's why it's not in there. So they're already providing those. And I actually think they talk about interest-based bargaining in that. I think I took it. That was a while ago. So, okay. And the last one. So the last one was submitted by MSAD 75, so that's Mount Ararat, was that CTE funding restoration. This resolution calls for the state to restore career and technical education funding for fiscal year 2019 levels for all CTE regions. What's that? So I'm confused on what from what to what. What was
I wonder
cut?
if that's a wrong date in there. I wonder if that's the wrong date.
So isn't fiscal year 2019 now? Well, right now it's 2019. So is it?
Oh, okay. So maybe that is the right date. If it's for
Oh yeah,
last
fiscal year would be 20. Yeah.
Yep, that's the right date. Yeah. So remember we had this year. What's that? Oh my God, I'm mixing my years up. Last spring, didn't we have a big jump in the local or our contribution to Region 10?
Yep.
Because the state funding dropped significantly. they changed how they were doing the EPS formula for them. And so it wasn't supposed to impact the CTEs, but then it did dramatically. It's particularly Region 10. I don't know if some other CTEs benefited or not, but Region 10 did not benefit.
Which is why 75 proposes.
Yep.
Okay.
And isn't 75 where the community passed and up to the teacher negotiations, but the board said no?
They currently don't have a contract yet.
Right. And the community's kind of in an uproar, and I'm wondering if this is the reason why they're having that problem.
Well, if I recall correctly, it was an increase, a significant percentage increase for us, but it was like 50 grand or something like that. I mean, it wasn't huge dollars, so I'm not sure it would necessarily cause an uproar in scope, but I guess if people are just looking at percentages, maybe. Valerie?
But I would be in favor of restoring the funding anyhow. No matter how deep or how light the cut happens to be, there shouldn't be a cut. If it was appropriated, it should be distributed to the CTE centers.
Right, because this current year, with the change impact, is only the second year that the funding has gone directly to the CTEs, right? Because previously to that, it was to the districts and counting of the kids. And okay. Anyone disagree with that last one? No. Okay. All right. So, any other suggestions, motions we want Lindsay to make on the floor? All right. Any other feedback, comments, in all seriousness, that we want to share? No? Okay. Hopefully, Lindsay and I will see a lot of you that day at the conference, in one of those 2 days at the conference. And just let Ginny know by next Thursday if you're able to make it, and she can get you registered. Okay, 14, personnel, none. Public comment. You've been so patient. Would you like to share?
Well, good evening now. My name's Dean Schlenner, and I'm a resident of Freeport. I hopefully don't want to take up too much of your time. I know it's getting late for everybody. I have two daughters who are now in high school, which is what, but my oldest daughter is a sophomore. She plays varsity basketball. She is a young lady who has been playing not only in varsity at high school, but also within AAU year-round. She has gone to the point level-wise that she can no longer work on our driveway or outside, and I've been trying to seek permission to use one of the gyms. I've gone through what I believe is the chain of command up to the superintendent and was given the information on policy procedures for the community use of school facilities. And there's a wording in here that I'm requesting or asking nicely if possibly could be changed so an individual could use the gym. In Roman numeral 2, section F, it states, community adults and children are free to use outdoor grounds and facilities outside the school day for recreational purposes. However, the spaces are not otherwise scheduled. However, formal approval for building and ground use will only be granted to organized organizations and groups. I don't fall into either one of those because it's just me helping my daughter. And I'm looking for that maybe a ruling change or something to allow me to come into the gym on the weekends and let her work out for an hour and a half on the basket is simply what I need. I would either be the high school or the middle school would be fine, either one. We would need, an hour and a half, 2 hours is typically her workout time. It wouldn't be every day. either a Saturday or Sunday, but it would be year-round. That's what she needs now. She's already been scouted as a freshman. Albany University asked her to come out to the school, tour the campus with NCAA approval, and this is what she wants to do. She holds her grades up really high, and I'm just trying to help her out. So that's really what I'm asking the board, if I can get that permission. So if there's anything I can answer for anybody, or what I need to do now would be great.
Okay. So generally how it works is you provide your comment. If any board members have any clarifying questions, they can ask them. Otherwise, the follow-up would be, you know, if we wanted to direct the policy committee to consider a change to the policy, because it is sort of laid out how use of the facilities is to be allowed. So does anybody have any questions, clarifying questions they need answered? No? Okay.
I do have, under one of the policy, I guess, guidelines, you do have to have insurance available. I do have a $500,000 insurance policy in place. All I need is an address in which to put on that for that. I can extend that out to, I believe, $5 million if I need to. I'm willing to do that. That's just simply, I guess what a father does for his daughter, so.
I guess I'm curious to know, you've gone through the chain of command, what the answers are. So we've heard what you're presenting, but we haven't heard what you've been told.
I've been told no. I don't want to really get into what the answers were. I've talked to the superintendent about this. That's a whole nother can of worms right there. I first started by going to Mr. Sickles, then to Mr. Wagner, then to the superintendent, and went from there.
Yeah, so I think that the distinction was the groups. So we have a policy that says they can be rented by groups, not individuals. So
I guess it would just need to be a 501c3 organization or something like that. And I get, you know, I don't need to do it, nor do I want to do that.
Right. Okay. So, Kate, do you have a question? Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what's appropriate at this point in time in terms of deliberation discussion.
So yeah, it's not something that we should deliberate as a board. What we could do is, if we felt like we wanted to discuss, send it to the policy committee.
That was going to be my recommendation.
Okay.
I think there's a few things. I'm on the policy committee, Maddie is too. There's a few things that I have questions that we need to research legally, and we could come back to the board.
Logistically. Yeah.
And I was going to request that we review it as well, and that and request the superintendent participation in that discussion.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, one other thing. If you talk about food, can you do it at the end of the day? You did that early, and I sat here hungry, and that just was not fair.
There was fruit.
I can't eat cookies. You talked about the diabetes. I got to watch that.
There's fruit over there.
Yeah,
The grapes are really good tonight.
Good to know.
So get some on your way out.
Okay, so I would take a motion to adjourn. Valley, Jen, all those in favor? Great, thank you.